Hello everybody, this is the Retro Bear back with you once again for another Saturday morning edition of Desert Island Games, and thank you very much indeed for giving us your time once again with this new episode. I know they do go on a bit, these, but there's some fascinating discussion to be had all the way through these. Lots of games, lots of gaming history, systems, consoles, memories. Very important to get those on. If you are listening to this the very, very first time, what I do, I ask a YouTube retro gaming or gaming community member to come on and talk about their gaming history. Interspersed with that, we talk about some of their favourite games. We give them the opportunity to take 6 games with them to the desert island. Favourite games or games that would be relevant if they were stuck on a desert island. We also allow them to bring on top of that 2 other games, one which is they can haven't perhaps played before in great depth, didn't get very far with, got so far with and couldn't go any further or didn't put enough time into. And also one other game which is to sort of torment them a little bit. It's not all paradise on this desert island. It's a game that they don't particularly like, particularly hate, and they can't get on with. But hey, they're on the desert island and that's what they've got. And I'm very pleased to say a relative newcomer to YouTube has been on the tube just under 12 months. I was just discussing it before we came on. And already he's making a real impression. I know he's made a real impression because he won YouTuber of the Month not very long ago. In fact, he beat yours truly to that monthly title, which is great. But does wonders to the tube. Lots of Spectrum stuff on the channel. There's a fantastic little series where his other half gives him some money, goes and buys some games with his money. I'll let you tell you all about it. I shall bring in the channel known as Generation Pixel, but I shall be calling him Stuart because that's his name. Hello, Stuart.
Hello, Mr. Bear. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much indeed for giving up your time for coming on, and it's a pleasure for me having you on as well. It's been wanting to get you on early in the run, so it's great to have you here.
Yeah, well, it's absolutely fantastic to be here, and it's actually mind-blowing to be here considering that, well, I've only been on YouTube for about 10 months, and I have watched previous desert island games, and it's people with way more history, so maybe not way more history in gaming, but way more history in YouTube anyway.
Well, that's it. But whether you've been doing this for a few months or a few years, it's what it is. It's all the same thing at the end of the day. It's all core interest, and it's about games and gaming and systems that you've owned and your experiences with that and memories. The memories are probably one of the best things about it because so many people can relate to things that have happened. How you may have had a console or a computer 1 minute and then the next minute it was gone because that sort of thing happens. It ends up in the skip or somebody sells it or. So,
or you just sell it yourself. Yeah,
that's the other side of it as well. You try and make a bit of money on the side as we go along. So, as always, we've had a bit of a discussion beforehand, and there's some fascinating gaming history. There really is. There's a couple of systems we haven't really focused on previously on this. In terms of your game list, that's a real interest to me because there's a lot of stuff on there that we've not even touched on. So, looking forward to getting into that. However, in the meantime, because as I mentioned, I've got your own YouTube channel, I'd like to give you a little bit of a few moments at the start to just tell the listeners what you actually do if they haven't come across your channel before. Before we do that, I'll just mention that I will put a link to Stuart's channel in the description below. So if you've not come across him before, pop along and have a look. But as always, the floor is yours. Tell us all about the world of Generation Pixel and what goes on your YouTube corner.
Well, as I've said, it's a very new channel, and to be honest with you, I had no idea what YouTube was all about until about the beginning of 2020. I was starting to collect again, and a friend said, you should check out YouTube if you're looking to collect and you're looking for games that maybe you've missed. Check YouTube. Now, I thought YouTube was a place for family videos. You take some holiday videos and you put them up on YouTube, and it's just for friends and family. But when he said to go and check YouTube, I typed in PlayStation 2 games rare, and the amount of videos that come up absolutely astounded me. I was gobsmacked, and from there I was hooked. Now, after discovering YouTube and talking to my son about me discovering YouTube, he says, yeah, I use YouTube all the time. I live stream, and what's that? So he shows me his channel, and what he does, he plays games, and he's got his little webcam on him. And he said, do you want to do one with me? I goes, okay, I'll do one with you. And we set up the channel, and once everything was in place and ready to do some work, he says, I can't really be bothered now, I'll just do my own. So I was left there with this channel and, the setup ready to go. And I thought, you know what, I'll just do it myself. And this is where I am. And it's hard to describe because other than the A to ZX of the Spectrum and the Nintendo adventures that I'm doing just now, everything else is just like a pick and mix. It's whatever I wake up and decide, you know what, I fancy talking about that today. Or, of course, the community challenges and the video responses to the rest of the community. They are fantastic. I love just picking them up. I mean, they come in at 100 miles an hour, though, so I tend to do maybe 3 in a video rather than,
try and do one each for each one.
Yeah, no, there's no way you could do it. I mean, the community is huge. That's another thing that blew me away when I started YouTube. To start with, for the first maybe 3 months, it was only the North American community that I really knew, and we talked back and forward with each other. And it was through an American tuber I came across Mark, Geordie Slasher Gaming.
Oh, he gets everywhere, he does.
Well, that's it. And I read the name, I goes, Geordie Slasher. I wonder if he's a real Geordie or if this is just a YouTube name. And I went on his channel, and there he is, and he's always Geordie glory. And I got chatting with him, and from him, you get introduced to other members of the YouTube community over in the UK, which I had no idea the size of. The scope is unbelievable.
That's strange. The way you mentioned that they started with the American side. Because I've noticed, looking through your comments and people who watch your videos, you've got a lot of American subscribers, and you do get a lot of contact from them. So you sort of went that and then came back to the UK tubers via Mark, which is because he gets everywhere.
Well, he does. He gets whenever I find a new channel, Mark's there in the comments just before me. He's just there. And I tend to leave just a message on his message saying, oh, you beat me here as well. Okay.
I said he should change his name to International Slasher Gaming because that's what he, he seems to be focused on the one area, the Geordie area. No, he's everywhere. And I'm like you. I think I'll get to some places first before he does. And now he's been there already.
He's been there, yeah.
Yeah. I'll have him on here at some point. I know that, but he's a great YouTuber as well. Love his stuff, and
he's just a fantastic person all round. Is Mark? I mean, not even just YouTube.
Yeah. He sent me a couple of messages about other stuff as well, which is always nice. You mentioned your son was quite keen. So there's obviously there's a interest in gaming running through your family. Is it the same? Have you got the crossovers, or is he focused on the more modern stuff and you're on the retro stuff?
Well, I've got 4 kids, and they're all gamers to a certain degree. Xander's the only boy, my only boy, but he loves first-person shooters. He loves modern games. Mm-hmm. He likes to be online. He likes to compete against other people online. Something I'm not interested in whatsoever.
Yeah, me neither.
Second youngest girl, Erin, she'll play retro games, so I've got hope for her. And she's only 12, so I've got hope for her because she will sit down and she'll play Spectrum games with me, and thoroughly enjoy them. So
that's good.
I've got hope. I've got hope for that one.
I was going to say, because modern games are a completely different breed, so to actually find somebody who's relatively young who all sit down and play Spectrum games. I mean, I've mentioned this before. I work with a guy who's probably about 15 years younger than me, and I showed him a tape game a few months ago, and he got no idea what it was. He goes, well, how's that work then? I was like, what? You being serious here? But of course, remembering he'd born 15 years after me, by the time he would have probably been interested in games, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, we'd have gone past the tape generation, we'd have gone past the floppy disk generation, we'd been into the CD generation, so I can understand it. It's just, I just refuse to accept to be old. That's the problem.
Well, that's I mean, it just depends when you were born, but as I say, with Erin, the second youngest, she's happy to play a game if she enjoys the gameplay. She doesn't need modern graphics, and she doesn't need, all the bells and whistles that come with the modern games. If she's happy with the gameplay, she will sit and play it for hours. So if I pick and choose wisely with the Spectrum games, she will sit and play. I mean, she played Hungry Horus for about 2 hours.
But again, as you say, it's the gameplay. It doesn't have to be the flash graphic. Any retro gamer will tell you that, and we always say that when you look back at some games now, yeah, they look bad at the time, but they look even worse now. But if that core playability is there, it shouldn't really make any difference what it looks like, what it sounds like. If your daughter's sitting there for 2 hours playing that, job done, isn't it? That's exactly what it's designed to do.
Gameplay is king.
Yeah, it always has been.
Yeah.
I'd always try and give something a chance like that. I don't care how bad it looks or how bad it reviews. I'll play it myself, see how it goes. I like games which people don't like or wouldn't touch with a barge pole because they don't look great, but I can sit there and happily play them. I can sit there and play games which I'm really bad at for hours on end and not get very far with them, but I'm still playing them.
Well, that's it. It just depends whether you're enjoying that gameplay.
It is very, very interesting. I've also got a quick note to ask you to talk about the subject of your YouTube channel, and then we'll move on to your gaming history.
Certainly.
Owls.
Owls? Oh, no.
Actually, I'm asking on behalf of Mrs. Bear because she did mention this earlier. She said, ask Stuart about owls tonight.
Well,
so
you see,
about owls.
With the Better Half box, in every one, there will be a reference to an owl, whether it's in the game or not. And that's purely due to the fact that my better half just happens to be half Indian, and the owl or the ulu is considered an idiot. And I don't think, let your imagination go there. Yeah, that's what she considers. I'm her ulu, her idiot, and she likes to remind me at every opportunity she can get. So in that better half box, there will be an owl in some way, shape, or form. So
that's great.
Yeah.
That's a great story. It's like me and Mrs. Bear. Bears are our thing, so that's very much our sort of. But yeah, I mean, it's great she gets involved in that as well. I do like those videos where you give her your money to go and buy you something. Yeah, I try and do it the other way around. I try and get Mrs. Bear to spend her money and buy me stuff, and it does work sometimes. And she tends to buy me a lot of t-shirts. So most of the t-shirts I wear on my channel are the ones that she's bought.
Well, to be fair, my better half would buy me the t-shirts as well because she's got to be seen with me. So she decides what I wear,
It's a very good way of putting it. That.
I mean, that's it. I mean, I don't care what I wear,
Yeah, me neither.
I try not to leave the house, so.
But she very rarely buys me any games. I say, I never know what to get. I said, well, go upstairs and have a look, and there's loads of games on the shelf there, but I think there's so many of them. She's a bit wary about buying me something I haven't got, but she did at Christmas this year, just gone, 2020. She did actually buy me some games, having reverted to looking at a gaming list or my collection on the shelf, which is quite good. So,
yeah, well, my better half, she's never bought games for me before until the better half box. So it took a bit of persuasion to do this better half box. And the only reason she's doing it is because she didn't want me wasting the money on the subscription services that we got here in the UK, where you pay them the money and then they send you shovelware.
Yes, I've seen your videos on that, and that is an absolute scandal. It really is. It's shocking, some of the stuff that they've, and not just you, other people I've seen pick them up as well, and they've had exactly the same experiences. It's not good. It should be a lot better than that.
It should be. And when you watch the subscription boxes from North America, they're getting quality games that are worth the money that they're spending on the subscription boxes. But hey,
I know someone's trying to make it. You wonder whether it's on the back of this wave of retro interest again that someone thought, there's a market here I can do. There's nobody else doing that, is there? There's not, as far as I'm aware. There's nobody.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, in Glasgow, where we are, the only place you can buy retro games is CX or Cash Converters, or if you find them in a charity shop.
Yeah, if you're lucky enough to.
We have nothing else than that. There's no retro stores whatsoever up here, so we've got slim pickings and it's awful.
Yeah, Yeah, if you're limited to the same sort of places each time. I mean, where I am, I'm lucky that I've got 3 or 4 quite decent independent retro game stores. I tend to spend more time in there now. I'll still go around the other places, but I tend to spend more time there because I can guarantee I'll find something in there I want or I can pick up. Whereas if I go to CEX, gas converters, etc., charity shops, it's very much hit and miss. Very much
Well,
hit and
that's
miss.
it, yeah.
Yeah. Right, so now we put the world to rights. Let's crack on with your gaming history. And this is going right the way back again. I think possibly maybe one of the earliest ones I've had on for systems. We'll get to your computers in a short while, but there was obviously your first experiences with the real sort of classic arcade games.
Yeah, my first experience. Well, my first experience of video games was a Pong clone that my dad brought home way back when I was like 5 years old. So that was what 1978.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you're only born a fraction before me then, so we're not that. That's nice to know. Everybody seems to be younger. I seem to be talking to, but yeah.
No. So yeah, 1978. I was 5. He brought home a Pong machine, and it was mind blowing at the time. You'd never seen your input making a difference on the TV screen before.
Mm.
But then again, Star Wars had been out, and I'd seen Star Wars a couple of times in the cinema because it was the first movie I was taken to see. So I wasn't that blown away because I think things were changing at the end of the 70s. At the end of the 70s, things were becoming the generation that we're in just now, where things are digital and exciting and fast-paced. But Pong, yeah, it was the first game that I ever played, and yeah, it blew my little 5-year-old mind that I was controlling something on the TV and it was making a difference, and it was a game.
You have that connection to it, don't you? When you first play something like that, it's like this is. I can't remember what my first experience was like. It probably wouldn't have been much longer after yourself. I can't remember what attracted me to it and flipped that switch to sort of say, "Wow, this is great." But again, you just get drawn in, and you immediately something clicks.
Yeah, absolutely, and I can remember that day clearly. I mean, I've got a fairly good memory when it comes to video games as well, which is weird. But yeah, I remember it clearly. So. I remember him coming in with the orange Binatone Pong machine and the small TV. Now, the TV we had at the time, you tuned in with a dial. It wasn't a button. So you'll remember those. So we had to find the channel, and it was wonderful.
I don't know why. It's much more. I don't know. It just seems you miss that sort of thing now. You press a button, the TV tunes in automatically.
Well, that's it. Yeah, you don't have to do any work.
Where's the fun in that? When we first had Channel 4, Andy, we couldn't get Channel 4 picture because only a certain, not Channel 5, when Channel 5 first started, only a certain amount of the population had access to it. Everybody else had to sort of wait for a few years. And my dad was there on the portable trying to tune Channel 4 in. And he could never get it. He could only get the sound would come through, but he couldn't get the picture. So he'd sit there watching Channel 4 with a snowy picture and the sound. I'm like, what? Even at the age sort of 7, I'm like, what are you doing?
Well, it was a brand new channel. They'd never had a new channel for such a long time.
Well, that's it. It was a highlight of the year, that was. So so Pong was your first experience then?
Pong was the first experience.
A Binatone system.
Binatone, yeah.
I'm surprised those systems aren't actually worth a lot more money than they seem to be.
Oh no, they're pennies. You can pick them up for £10-15.
I'm surprised they're so cheap. I don't. Maybe they mass produce billions of them. I don't know, but compared to the price of other retro, they don't seem to command the interest or the amount of money. So a bit bizarre, that one. Mind you, again, on modern TVs, you might be able to use them.
Well, this is it. In modern TVs, it would be an absolute nuisance to try and tune in. So
they just wouldn't work. I mean,
no, you would have to. Yeah, you'd have to strip it down and put in a mod to get it coming through as composite. So that's why. I mean, It's a nice. I've got one, but it's an ornament. You know,
Yeah. It's
I wouldn't use it.
I can't tune my 2600 won't tune into some modern tellies. One of them it will do. I've got 3 or 4, but most of it just won't pick up anything on it at all. So as you said, modifications probably needed on that. So from Pong, experiencing that in the home, and you mentioned Star Wars, so we're moving on to keeping a space theme.
Absolutely. Well, it was a very space-themed era.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Yeah. So after that, it was Space Invaders, the arcade machine in 1980. It was put into a local chippy, of all places, and my dad took me to see that. Again, my dad has guided me through my gaming sort of years, although he's not much of a gamer himself, but he was always there almost at the beginning saying, no, you've got to go and look at this. I don't think his interest actually stayed with what he found, but he would find something new, direct me to it, and that would be me away. But yeah, 1980, so Space Invaders in a chippy, and that really did change things, because I was wasting money on that, because it was 10p a time, and that was a fair bit of money back in 1980, 10p.
It was. Yeah.
I mean, going to the cinema cost me 50p. And
was it as cheap as that back then? 50p.
It was
blimey.
50p that I paid, in the cinema, right up until about, I think it was 86 when it went up to £1, and I was devastated. But
you've got a good memory. I can't even remember it being that cheap at all.
Yeah,
Goodness me,
yeah, 50p for £1. I could get bus fare, return bus fare, and get a Mars bar and go and see a film for £1 back in the early 80s.
I think I remember when I first went to we had the first 10-screen cinema around here, the Merry Hill Shopping Centre. It's still there now. They've still got a 10-screen cinema. I think it was like £2 or £2.50 a ticket. It's like, wow, this is really expensive. But that was probably turn of the 80s, start of the 90s. That was. I used to go quite a lot back then. But before you mentioned Space Invaders and Chip Shop, we had Pengo in our local chip shop.
Yeah, no.
The Penguin game. Yeah, it was. Chip Shop's still there, because that's my local chip shop. I still go there after all these years. But yeah, I just remember that being there and being absolutely transfixed, looking at the screen like, wow, this is just great. You think when you automatically start playing with the joystick, you ain't got no money in there. You start trying to move things around, and that was one of my first early gaming experiences. Even though my dad never actually gave me any money for it, because unlike your dad, to an extent, my dad's been the exact opposite to try to keep me away from gaming. To the point now that the only reason he shows an interest is he buys me Switch games every year for Christmas.
Well, at least he's buying you a Switch game every year for Christmas. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't. Yeah, just great. So, but again, like he wasn't much of a gamer. He just didn't. I don't know, just whether he didn't understand them or just wasn't interested in them. He just kept me out, because I think they've seen as a distraction, and I am easily distracted.
No, with my dad, it was a case of it was new and shiny and interesting, and he would gravitate towards that. But I would get stuck and enjoy it, and he would get bored after a little while and look for something else. So, but that was handy, because it was him that would later on, as we'll probably speak about the gaming history, take me down other paths. So. But yeah, the chip shops were fantastic back then. I don't know why chip shops had arcade machines. I suppose before that they were only in pubs, and that was like the Pong games and that. They were in pubs. They weren't for children.
No.
But for some reason, chip shops, let's throw in an arcade machine.
And especially as my chip shop is like still really small. It's like long and narrow. Yeah. So. And they've remodeled it since then. I mean, it's completely different now what it was. But I remember where the arcade machine was. I thought, how to get people in here queuing up? If you go down on a Friday, or before COVID, and that to change the way they did it, people used to be queuing out the door on a Friday night.
That's right.
Because there was, tightly packed 2 lanes of people. You join the queue at one end and move through. And then in the old days, it was an arcade game there at the very end. So I don't know.
And it wasn't just the Space Invaders, because after Space Invaders, what was it they got in? Battlezone?
Oh yeah,
The tank one with the periscope.
they got that in the chip shop.
They got that in the chip shop, and the first time we were there, my dad had to pick me up because obviously I'm only about 7 years old at the time. He had to pick me up so I could see through the periscope, and then the chip he got in a box that the kids could stand on, so we could actually play the game through the periscope. It was such a wonderful game as well, and that was another one that was mind blowing again because that was a first person shooter. So
yeah.
I mean, we played the Pong, which was fun, and then Space Invaders, which was fast and frustrating. And then you had this first-person shooter, and you were looking through a periscope, and that was, again, how far is this going to go?
But I mean, in a chip shop of all places. Having said that, you mentioned that when I went to Blackpool when I was 12, we went to on like a day trip. We went to a cafe, I think it was, and they had the sit-down Empire Strikes Back arcade machine, and I thought, I think about it now. I thought that's really out of place to be in a cafe because all these tables dotted around, and right by where the stairs were, there was this arcade machine shoved under the stairs, and I was like, "Wow, look at this!"
Oh, fantastic machine that as well.
Yeah,
that was such fun.
Well, one of Mrs. Bear's favourite things to say is that one day she wants to own a proper sit-down Star Wars arcade machine.
That would be nice. I've always wanted a Space Invaders cab, an original Space Invaders cab, and that's just purely for the nostalgia.
Yeah.
Because that was the first proper game. Because I don't count Pong. Pong was fun, but at 5-year-old, I don't think I was that invested in it. But by the time I played Space Invaders, it was like, no, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. I want to play Space Invaders.
And especially got Battlezone in there after that. That would have
and then Battlezone, yeah.
Oh man, having that in a chip shop, I still can't believe that. It's like, wow, that is fantastic.
I just don't understand why chippies were such a big place for arcade cabinets.
I don't get it. Were the chips any good at the chip shop?
Oh, they were fantastic, yeah.
Oh, well, there you go then. It's bonus. Yeah. Good food and a Battlezone arcade. And that's fantastic. Any other arcade games come to spring to mind that you played very early on, or?
Oh, I played most of them early on. So let me see. What ones did I get hooked on? I get hooked on Defender and Centipede.
Centipede.
With the rollerball. You need the trackball for that. And of course, Pac-Man. But Pac-Man, it was okay, but it didn't keep my attention too long. It was just a maze. And I wouldn't have played much of that. Trying to think where they were in, because you're talking moving on towards the time where I would have home machines that I would be gaming on more likely.
Okay.
But yeah, I played most of them. Anything that came out. I mean, the chip shop had like a cycle for some reason where they got different machines in, and then the arcades started opening up in the town, so we could go into the town and there were actual arcades. It's something I so miss.
Yeah. Well, we had that at the cinema as well, when the big one I mentioned earlier, when that opened up, they actually had an arcade. You walked in, on the right-hand side was an arcade, and they had all the major arcade games. They Simpsons, Turtles. That's obviously a bit further on from where we're talking, but that was the only one arcade I can remember that was. I mean, obviously we're not by the seaside here or anything like that. We're not right in the middle of the country, so finding something like that was rather obscure. But yeah, we used to go up there all the time and play on those.
Yeah, well, I grew up in a small Ayrshire town, Kilmarnock, so I'm surprised we got anything like that, because we were normally like 10 years behind Glasgow. But no, it done well for arcades in Kilmarnock. I don't know what it was, but we were lucky. We had a Leisureland, and I'm sure Leisureland was quite a big chain of arcades. They had Leisureland, and they would have a Miss Munchies, which was a small cafe. And there's quite a few places around Scotland that had a Leisureland and Miss Munchie. So arcades were quite big in Scotland. So
yeah, that sounds quite good, that. Yeah, I just think that there was another one that was, again, reasonable distance at the other side of a country park, and then you go down over the back, there's a pub, and there's an arcade there as well. And I think That again, that would have been sort of late 80s, 86, 88. Quite a few kids from school used to go up there, but it's a hell of a trek to get up there. I wouldn't try doing it now.
Well, as I said, it was a small town we were in, so there was no trek from anywhere. The furthest distance I went was between home and my secondary school. And I would, instead of spending my bus fare on a bus, I would walk to school, go to the arcades after school, and then walk home. So, I mean, you didn't spend your money on lunch back then. You knew you would get fed at home.
Yeah, I can relate to that. My mom, that was other reasons for that as well. But yeah, I know exactly what we're on about. Yeah. Okay, so we from the arcades, we touched on it briefly there, and moving on to sort of the home systems, and we'll do a bit on that before we get into your game list. So after the Space Invaders experience, then what happened?
Well, that's when people started getting systems in the house. My cousin, he stayed in the town over, my cousin, and he got an Atari 2600. And that was absolutely mind-blowing because although, we knew it wasn't as good as the arcade versions of Pac-Man and Space Invaders, to be able to play those games in your home, sitting in your couch with your cousin beside you, that was fantastic. And I had a friend who that year got a ZX81, so 1981, and the only game I remember playing on it was 1K chess. And I don't know if you know 1K chess, but it's a chess game that it runs on 1K of memory, so it's very, very basic. All the pieces are just numbers and letters. And we played 1K chess. But I begged my parents for an Atari 2600 all of the next year. Begged, and I was convinced I was getting it. And then on Christmas Day, 1982, I woke up to a ZX Spectrum, and that changed everything.
Right. Wow.
That changed absolutely everything.
So was there a reason for that, or?
My dad again. It was my dad again. I begged them for the Atari. Now, they had played the Atari as well at the cousins, my auntie's house. And they loved playing the video games. I don't think we called them video games back then. I think they were computer games still.
Yeah, anyway. I don't know. I know the Atari was called the video games, so video computer system, or the VCS is referred to sometimes. But
we tended always to have as computer games. Everything was computer games. But anyway, so they'd played it and they'd enjoyed it, and it looked like they were more than happy to get me the Atari 2600. And until Christmas morning when I woke up to the ZX Spectrum. And I can remember saying, "What's this?" And my dad going, "It's better than the Atari. You'll be able to do more with this."
Wow.
And absolutely right, because he'd obviously tested it out before Christmas Day. So he loaded in Hungry Horace, because we had Hungry Horace. That was the only game that came with it, other than the Sinclair tape that had various different programs on it. Loaded in Hungry Horace, and we played that for hours and hours. And then he says, "Now look at the book." And we open up the manual, and it's got all this type-in programming. So all this basic. He goes, "If you start typing that into the computer, it will do things for you." And I'm like, "What?" "We'll try it." And you do it, and you get things like the Stars and Stripes picture, or the sunburst, or a little tune, a little bit tune. And it completely changed the way I was going to game, because I had no interest in the Atari after that. Because not long after that, the amount of games that came out for the Spectrum, that was mind-blowing.
That's a great story. That's really good. So I remember my dad, the reason my dad always shied away from buying a computer those days, because they came on tape. So he would always say, "Oh, no, no point in having tapes." He said, "They're a waste of time. You might as well wait until, we'll get a disc-based one at some point in the future." We waited years and years and years for it. And then we did eventually get one. It was like with Sky when Sky first came. It's, "Oh, can we have Sky? Can we have Sky?" No, not the additional side. The age can wait until cable. And you find out when cable's coming in 6 years' time. So you can imagine the excitement when the promotional video for cable TV dropped to the door at some point in 1992, telling you that at some point in the next 2 years you're going to get cable. It's like, "Oh, we're going to have cable in 2 years." Yeah. and we got it straight away. But as soon as my dad got to the point where he felt it was the right time to buy a computer for us, it was the Amiga. So it was a disk-based system rather than. So I missed all the computer stuff out. That completely passed me by.
No, my dad was a magpie. Something new and shiny. I'm pretty much the same myself. Something new and shiny. It's, ooh, let's go and have a look. He is a Geordie and they're magpies, so there could be something to that.
It could be, yeah. But I like the reason behind it where he said it's better, or it's going to be better for you. And he's absolutely right, because you would have got more out of that.
Oh, absolutely.
As a computer, if you bought an Atari would just play the games on it, which is fair enough. But the computer, you would have got more out of it, and I like the reasoning behind that.
Got so much more out of the ZX Spectrum than I would have out of the Atari. Yeah. But yeah.
So having played it for the first time, did you obviously start amassing in games quite quickly as soon as they came out? Or was it just focused on that, or?
A lot of the games that came out were handily £1.99. You got a lot of games at £1.99 from newsagents and stuff like that. But more importantly, we were all pirates back then. Yes. Every one of us were all a bunch of 10 to 15-year-old pirates, and we had more C90 tapes filled with games than you could count. Games was never an issue on a ZX Spectrum. No,
you're absolutely right. Remember seeing people exchanging them at school and cram so many different titles on them, and they would pass them around and swap them about. Because you mentioned games of £1.99, of course, that for yourself was like 4 trips to the cinema. So
it was still a lot of money, but it was still a reasonable amount of money compared to the cartridge games. Cartridge games, they were awfully priced.
Yes, they were. They still have been all the way through. Yeah.
Well, to be fair, if you take into consideration inflation, we're doing okay with video game prices because they haven't changed. Right, They haven't changed much since the 80s.
No, I did have this. I can't remember if it was on one of these or on our podcast with a discussion about this. And if you do, you are right. We do take that into account. It's pretty much the same, because they always were more expensive, but they are still the same. New games are still now the same price as new games were 30 years ago.
Yeah, and we should be glad of that. Yeah. I'm still unhappy that they're starting to bump the prices up to the £60 and £70 mark.
But then again, Street Fighter 2, when that first came out, the SNES was 65 quid, and I know that because a friend of mine paid 65 quid for it.
We can't really complain.
No, we can't.
Because back in the 80s and 90s, that was an absolute fortune.
And full price games then were, I think, $7.99 weren't they on the Spectrum, and then they were $9.99.
Yeah, that's it.
64 and
it wasn't something that was out with getting a few for your birthday or Christmas.
Yeah, and if you had a disc-based system, then they were a bit more expensive on top of that as well.
And that was it. They were extortionate.
Yeah. But I mean, I never owned a ZX81, which is I think we got one somewhere. I think Mrs. Bears had a repairer one, but I never actually played on one. I mean, my experience was with the 48K, and I've got the 48K now and the 128 now as well, the +2 one. So I've sort of get my joy from those. Did you not have a 2600 then, or did you just play on somebody else's?
No, never had it. It was always just my cousins that we played on. Yeah.
And then after the ZX81, did you continue your run of Spectrum collecting? Or swapping them in and out?
No, I was I was Sinclair Spectrum from then right until 1990. And the first one I had, that one I got on Christmas Day, was a 16K ZX Spectrum with the rubber keys, and still got one, and it's lovely to look at, horrible to use.
Yeah, they're not. I've tried one. It's like, oh dear.
Not long after that, my dad picked me up the RAM pack, the 32K RAM pack, so I boosted it up to the 48K, so you can start playing the 48K games. And then after that, we moved on to the +2. That was with a tape deck, which was 128K. And from there, it just went through to the +3. That was the last Spectrum that had the +3 with a disc drive.
Oh, well, you had the +3. Fantastic. I'd like to get one of those myself, but they are a bit pricey at the moment, so maybe not. But
see, I don't have much nostalgia for the +3 because that's where I ended with the Spectrum, I think. So, whereas I could go back and look at the rubber key 48K or 16K and absolutely love it. When I see the +3, I just see I was done with you.
Yeah. What was your favourite incarnation of the Spectrum that you had?
My favourite +2 with the tape deck plugged in because you didn't have to mess about with the volume to get the baud rate right and stuff. It was like loading a tape, it would load if it was going to load. Whereas when you had to connect your own, data cassette, tape recorder.
It's one of those machines which does split people down the middle because a lot of people don't like it. But when I first saw it in the shop, I was like, wow, giant keyboard, big cassette thing on the end of it, anything. Look at the size of that. You compared it to Commodore 64, which was like this brown thing. I mean, I favour the 64 more over the Spectrum. That's because I played more 64 games when I was younger. But the 128 +2 is a fantastic looking piece of kit. It really is. That's why I like to look at the 464 as well, because it's the same.
It's the same sort of shell,
thing.
yeah. It's the same shell.
Albeit it's got different coloured keys and what have you on them. But the +2, I just thought, that looks fantastic. It really does.
Yeah, well, we weren't very Commodore up our way. Everybody had a Spectrum. There was only, what were the different micros we had? I had one friend down the street, he had a Dragon.
A Dragon 32?
32, he had a Dragon 32. And was it the Amstrad that came with a green screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was one lad that had the green screen, and that was awful.
I don't know what they were thinking. I know it's £100 cheaper to have it with the green screen, but
yeah, no, he had it with the green screen. I remember that, playing like Lunar Lander and things like that. But yeah, everybody had Spectrums.
That's really surprising. Sorry, go.
No, everyone had Spectrums. I think there was only one chap had a Commodore 64, and we hated him because he was more American.
Oh, right.
He wanted to be more American than British. We weren't happy with that.
There's a good reason for hating that sort of thing anyway. But it was different around here because everybody around here had 64s. No one had. I knew a couple of people had Spectrum. I mean, anybody with an Amstrad, it's like finding the Yeti. There was nobody like that. And a Dragon. I hadn't even heard of a Dragon until about 20 years ago that they existed. So that was a strange one. Somebody knew somebody with a Dragon 32. Wow.
Yeah, I'm trying to think because there was a chap across the road from us. He worked on the oil rigs. So he was the rich guy in the street because he worked in the oil rigs. And I remember my dad taking me over to his house to see a real computer. Now, to this day, I can't tell you what it was. I mean, whatever computer it was in 1983, 84, I would have to do some research to see what was out about that time. But he had a real computer, not like our microcomputer. So it must have been one of the early Apples or IBMs, probably an IBM. And I remember playing my first ever role-playing game on that. And it was turn-based, but it was all stick figures and the like, and I can't remember at all that game, and that really frustrates me because it was the first RPG I played, and I remember taking my party of 6 people, or 6 dots as it was, to go across the main map, getting into a battle and casting fireball, and that's all I remember. But I remember loving it.
Yeah.
But hey, no, there was a lot of different computers about, but the Spectrum where we were, that was king. Sinclair was king there. So
yeah,
I think it was the one because most of the kids had Spectrum, so we were all copying games. So all the games were for Spectrum. So if you didn't have a Spectrum, you were shut out in the cold.
That's exactly what I found out when I got the Amiga, because everybody had STs at the time. So there was just 6 or 7 kids at school. They were swapping games all the side, and they said, "Oh, you should have bought an ST. You're over there with the Amiga on your own." 12 months later, everybody had got Amigas, and even those people who had STs they'd upgraded to Amigas. And there was only one kid who was left with an ST. It was like, oh, well, told we, they're 12 months ago. That's it. And for some reason, just at Christmas 1990, load of families just went out and bought people who'd never even owned computers. Kids at school I'd been with for years, through primary school into secondary school, who'd never had a computer in their life, for some reason got an Amiga at Christmas. It was absolutely bonkers. It really was. You come back after school for Christmas. Oh, what did you get for Christmas? Oh, I had an Amiga. What? You never mentioned games before in your entire life? Because I was obviously got the Amiga. My friends had got a Master System, and he'd upgraded to a Mega Drive shortly, and people were starting to get interested in consoles. And people who'd never had a computer before have all of a sudden got one for Christmas. Which I can't quite understand, but anyway, there we go. We were able to start an Amiga games group, which we had 2 meetings of, and we used to swap games all the time. So that was beneficial from that point of view, because I think I was the only person who actually bought Amiga games ever, from what I've understood now. Speaking to people who owned Amigas at the time, I was the only one who was buying games. Everybody else was copying them.
Well, I think that was like for most of us back in the day as well. You copied games, or we got copies of games.
Not me. I went and bought them.
No, I did buy a few, but it wasn't. I mean, I wish I could go back now and buy the games and have them all again in boxes and the big box variants.
Yeah.
But we were kids. We didn't want to buy them. We wanted to play them, and you know what? That was fine. That's what we were doing. We were playing the games.
And for the price of blank tapes, it's nothing, is it really? You know.
But it wasn't back then, no.
No. Absolutely not.
You wouldn't go to Dixon's to buy a game. You'd go to buy a pack of C90s.
They couldn't have said, we're selling no games, but we seem to be selling an awful lot of these blank tapes. Yeah. And call the head office again. Why are you selling so many blank tapes? I don't know. Sell some of them Spectrum games instead. Well, they don't seem to be interested in those. Better to buy the stuff with tapes without anything on them. Try to put 2 and 2 together. Let's step away from your gaming history then, because that brings us quite nicely up to a certain point there. Some fascinating stuff there, Stuart. I really enjoyed listening to that. That was brilliant. It's bringing back some memories for me as well.
Well, we're old guys.
Well, we are indeed, yeah. The old fogies club tonight, I'm afraid. But let's have a look at your game, the 6 games that you got on your desert island. Couple of games here. One I've never heard of. But the one at the top of your list, love this choice, because I know there'll be people who are listening who've played this and will go, oh yeah, I remember playing that. That was brilliant. And it's so much fun, this game. It really is.
Yeah.
Go on then. Tell us what your first one is then.
The first one I'm going to be taking with me, and make sure it's packed, is Rockstar Ate My Hamster.
Oh, what a great game.
And it's a fantastic game.
So what's the attraction of this one then? Anybody, there will be a lot of people who won't know what we're talking about. So,
for anyone who doesn't know what Rockstar Ate My Hamster is, it's a band management simulator. What you do is you're a manager with a set amount of capital, and you go out and you select band members, equip them, write their music, and then promote them and hopefully get them to number 1. But it's a bit on the naughty side too.
There is a level of humour and edge to it, isn't there? I suppose
it's a very cheeky game. Now it's a game very much of its time. If any of my kids played it today, they wouldn't have a clue what they were looking at. But it takes some liberties with 80s pop stars, shall we say.
There's quite a few in there, aren't there?
Yeah, the band that you put together, it's not just random people. Well, it is, I suppose, because obviously they didn't want to get sued. But you had things like Bimbo Baggins, which was Kylie Minogue, basically, because you got the picture of what was a spitting image rendition of Kylie Minogue and Bimbo Baggins, and you had Phil Collins and you had David Bowie and a whole host of 70s and 80s rock and pop stars. But the development team had just ripped utter, I'm going to swear, pish out them.
That's it. There we go.
They absolutely ripped into those pop stars. But it's such a good, fun, light game. As I say, it's a it's a management sim, and it's one of the genres that I love. I love slow-paced simulations and management games. But the reason I'm taking this one is because of its humour. Because if you write a song with your band, you get to name the song. And if I was on that desert island and maybe going a bit stir crazy, I would get myself a band, I would write them a song, I would name that song My Explosive Farts. And then when it get to number one, I could run around the island screaming, My explosive farts are number one. And I could just go round in circles just to blow off some steam. And that's one of the reasons I would take Rockstar Ate My Hamster.
I think we'd just pay money to watch you do that anyway, and without having to go to a desert island.
I might just do a video.
Well, I would do. People now will be demanding that, Stuart. That's not the problem.
But on the serious side, yeah, it's actually a solid little sim management game as well. Besides having the cheeky humour in it, but that just made it. It just elevated it one step beyond. So,
because it's based around the music industry, has there been a game like it since? I don't think there has.
There hasn't been for like a console or anything. There was an online game called Project Rockstar, which was exactly the same thing minus the humour. You named your own band members. But with that, you could design album covers. You could take photographs and upload them as your album cover. And that went online. And it was, I don't know if you remember the football management games that were like play by mail and stuff like that.
Oh, yes. I did a few of those. Yeah.
Well, kind of like that, but only with musicians. And you would get your results back every day, how many sales your record had made or your album had made. But that's the closest that anything's come to Rockstar Ate My Hamster. It didn't have the humour, but it had the same management sort of aspects to it. But it was online only. It was an online game. And it was free.
Well, that's not too bad. You mentioned... Yeah, we do like a free. You mentioned play by mail. That's going to be another concept which is going to pass people by as well. It was fancy football, but it was football management, as you said, but you used to sort of make your team selections and pick your tactics, and then you'd write a check for £2 and you send it in the post, and about a week later you got the results back.
You did that?
And tell people that they look as if you got 3 heads, but that's what people used to do.
We didn't have Champ Manager back then.
No,
this is what we had to do.
This was years before Champ Manager, yeah.
Play by mail used to do that all the time.
Yeah. But I mean, this Rockstar Ate My Hamster is just, as you say, there's so much humour involved in the game.
It is.
It's okay. We've got this other version mentioned there, but I mean, to me, I think it's one of the most unique games. It's not because it's a management game saying it's unique. It's just the whole package is just completely different to pretty much most games out there. You couldn't find another game like it. How they got away with some of the likenesses and what have you. Yeah, it was very, very borderline, wasn't it?
It wouldn't happen today. Let's just say that. It would not happen today.
You'd have a team of lawyers outside Codemasters, wouldn't you? And,
which is a shame.
It is. And again, anybody who hasn't played it, if you have the opportunity to find a copy somewhere, they did come out in the 16 bits, did come out in the Amiga and STs with Amiga and ST collectors are listening out there. There was a release for it on there, but yeah, the 8-bit certainly. If you find a copy, just pick it up. It's as Stu said, it's an absolutely cracking experience and so much fun. And
put me in the mood to do a video for that.
Yeah, why not? That'd be a great idea. That would be a fantastic idea. That's a great choice. That it really is. And of course, the title of the game, Rockstar Ate My Hamster, is a variation on a very old famous newspaper. Remember newspapers? Newspaper headline, which was Freddie Starr Ate My Hamster.
Freddie Starr.
Do you remember Freddie Starr? You go and look him up on the internet. Maybe not. I don't know. Yeah. you might find some stuff on there which may be a bit what's the word? Politically incorrect now, I suppose.
Yeah, politically correct. I don't know.
But that's a
I
great
remember
choice.
back in the day there was only one thing that was a PC, and that was a police constable.
Yes.
There was no personal computers or politically correctness. It was
No,
police constable, and that was it. That's all we needed.
that's right. There used to be one on every corner.
Yes, I did. And they used to be able to give you a kick up the backside if you done anything wrong.
A clip round the ear, that was it,
Yep.
yeah. It doesn't make us sound old, though, doesn't it?
I think it's remarkable how quickly the decades pass.
Yes, you are right. I try not to watch old programs and stuff because I do think, I remember it used to be like that. Didn't everything seem much nice about then?
I'm the opposite. I just dive into nostalgia as often as possible.
Oh, I do as well, but I just find myself sitting and think, God, what's become of everything now? Everything seemed so much simpler back then. Anyway.
Well, it was.
Yeah.
I blame the internet. I've
got to blame something.
I blame the internet, and I would get rid of the internet, despite us doing this here just now.
Yeah, that's true. What would we do instead?
Probably player games.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, there we go. That's a good idea. We could try that. I don't think it'll catch on, to be honest with you. I'm sure 90% of the people who are on YouTube like us just buy stuff and collect it and hold it and don't play it. I'm sure they do. It's a very
don't get me wrong, I've got games I haven't touched yet.
Oh yeah.
But when I retire, I'm not going to have to play golf.
No, that's true.
I'll have a backlog sitting there waiting for me, and I won't need to leave the house. There'll be no work. The kids will be away somewhere else that's not here.
Be no golf.
And no golf, unless it's Tiger Woods 2004.
That's it.
But that's it. Yeah.
All the games you can eat would be great. Let's move on to your second choice then, because I now hands up on this one. I've got no idea what this game is at all, so you're gonna have to educate me on this one.
Zeus, Master of Olympus for the PC.
For the PC.
The PC, it's a Sim City and real-time strategy, or it has real-time strategy in it. It's a city builder based, however, in ancient Greece. So instead of building New York or whatever, you're building ancient Athens, and all the trouble that comes with that, including the gods. So rather than having tornadoes, and I mean, most people have played or know about SimCity, you can get the tornado to come through, or there's fires, earthquakes. When you're playing Zeus, Master of Olympus, Zeus himself might come strolling through your city and throw lightning bolts at it, and enemy armies might come in, and you have to build up little squads of your own army and send them out to battle in real-time strategy type. So, I mean, I just love it. Again, it's management, and I went through a phase that I'm still going through, obviously, where I love thinking about my games rather than relying on my reflexes. And I don't know whether that's because being born into the gaming generation right back in the day and only playing Space Invaders and Galaga and Centipede, and you get to a point where I don't want to do that anymore. I've moved on, and where I moved on was definitely with Sims and with management games. So with the likes of Zeus, you build your little city. It's like them all. It's got scenarios, so you can choose like the beginnings of Athens. And what you do is you build a little town, and you have to get it to maybe a population of 200. And then I'll add the next scenario, and okay, you've got it to 200. Now you need to get, a marble quarry going, and you have to start trading with partners across the sea. So, such a good game. But it's a Greek mythology that, I mean, there's a million of these games out there where you're playing Sim Cities. But when they threw in the Greek mythology and you were battling against, the Hydra or the Minotaur.
I was going to say, I'm getting Jason and the Argonauts and Clash of the Titans vibes from this one.
Well, that's exactly it, because that's the natural disasters that will come in and destroy your city, and you've got to defend your city against that. As well as the rest, they still throw in an earthquake and a volcano erupting every now and again just to mix it up. But But it mixed SimCity with real-time strategy, so you had battle elements that you had to be focused on and worried about happening as well. So as much as I like the slow, thoughtful game, I like it to throw me a curveball every now and again. So I've got to do this now. And yeah, and it's a game I can play for hours and hours, and weeks and weeks.
Well, that's the thing about those management games is that exactly what that you find yourself losing time on.
Yeah.
But I always say to people when they've never they mentioned a game I've never played before or even heard of before, and again they do a good job selling it to me. I'd love the sound of that. That's really good because Jason and the Argonauts and Clash of the Titans and Sinbad and the Golden Voyagers, Sinbad and all those films that were on the television when I was a kid.
That's all the scenarios as well. You have to go and get the Golden Fleece in one of your scenarios.
Oh, brilliant! Because those films had the old Ray Harryhausen models, the stop motion effects, and it takes me back. That does. Wow! So that really interests me. That I like the sound of that.
It's a good time sink.
Is it one of those games that just sort of continually goes on? There's no ending to it. You just carry on.
You can play it in sandbox.
Yeah.
So you can choose to do the scenarios and work your way through the storyline, or you can just open up the sandbox and build and defend until you're bored building and defending.
What was your greatest achievement on it?
That I've probably finished it about 300 times in my lifetime. I mean, I've done everything in the game that you can do. And I think the game's greatest achievement is that I would sit down tonight and do that again. Yeah.
That's the attraction of these games, isn't it? You just keep going back to them over and over again. I was exactly the same with Football Management. I would play those games and then stop playing them, and then
wait till we get to Football Management games.
Yeah. 6 weeks later, I come back to it and I start all over again with somebody else.
That's it. Yeah.
And you just would do that. It's just one of those things. But this is really good. I don't usually like SimCity style games. I remember playing Populous when I was younger, and I was like, it's a bit dull this for me. And people used to play games like Settlers, Megalomania. That's the other one as well. They you got to play this. And I was like, it's not really my sort of thing. But now you've mentioned all that, I'm like thinking, the Greek mythology aspect of it, I think probably lifts it to a level where I'm going, I'd be prepared to sit down and give that a go. I'm the person who tried Jurassic Park Operation Genesis and got really bored after about 5 minutes. Because I said, well, where's all the dinosaurs? I've got to build a park. Oh, God, I want to do all this. Bring on the dinosaurs. No. So, I'll probably be sitting there thinking, go on, bring on the Cyclops. Where's the Cyclops coming?
But that's it, yeah. And as I say, I'm older, so classical studies was a big part of my education in high school. We had to learn that stuff. We had to read the Odyssey and the Iliad. So playing that, I just got my knowledge from Greek mythology from BBC Two every now and again when they showed those films. That was it. But loved them as well. Yeah. Oh, they're great. If they're on again at Christmas, they're usually on at Christmas or bank holidays or whenever they've got a gap in the schedule. They always throw at least one a year. I got fascinated that Tom Baker was in one of the Sinbad films. I think it was Sinbad, the Eye of the Tiger, I think it was. Yeah. And he had a massive role in that, and that was a role that got him the role of Doctor Who. Well, I'm thankful for that, because he is the best Doctor Who. He is. I met him personally as well, which was a great experience. He offered me a jelly baby, but I found out he does that to most people he meets. I thought it was quite special. I thought it was quite special, but now does it quite a lot, or did it quite a lot? I don't know. That's quite nice, though, that he still carries on with that. He was sitting next to Louise Jameson, who was Leela in the original TV series, and she had great pleasure in telling me that her brother's name was also Russell. So it was a fantastic experience. That was. I've actually connected with both of them. Oh, yeah. Fantastic! Yeah. Anyway, we're going on a tangent, so that's great. So yeah, a couple of great games there. We'll go with another one from your list, because I think we can do that one now, and then we'll jump back to your game in history. So if you want to give us the third game off your list again, now
I'm completely and utterly at your disposal here because I've heard of the game, but I've never played any of them at all, so I've got no idea what this is.
Okay, so the third game on the list, and this will be no surprise to anyone that knows me, and that is Suikoden 2.
Suikoden 2. I'm glad you said Suikoden because I've got no idea how to pronounce that.
Well, you see, this is one of the things I hate about Google Translate. A lot of Westerners will pronounce it Suikoden because they'll go into Google Translate and they'll write in Suikoden and then they'll click on the read this out on the English translation and it'll pronounce it with the SUI as Sui. Very
Right.
European, Suikoden.
Yes.
Whereas if they used their initiative and went and pressed on the Japanese, it would pronounce it Suikoden.
Mm.
But anyway, that's a tangent. Let's not rant about the name of Suikoden. It's Suikoden 2, and Suikoden 2 is a JRPG, a Japanese role-playing game from, 1997, 98? There or thereabouts. It came, I think, just after Final Fantasy VII. And now the thing that, as I said before, way back in the day, I played on that real computer, and I played an RPG, a turn-based RPG, and I can't for the life of me remember what it is. Now, the next RPG that I played was Final Fantasy VII, and after I played that game, I went out and hunted every RPG I could get my hands on.
Right.
And Suikoden, the first game in that series, was the next one that I found. And because it was later on, Suikoden 2 was already out, so I could get both of them at the same time. Now, the thing that I liked most about Suikoden 2 is that everything was going 3D. Everything was going polygonal graphics, like Final Fantasy VII. Most people will know that. Suikoden 2 stayed at 16-bit pixel art. So you were 2D. It was 2D gaming. The world map was 2D, and you had a little character that was 2D bit art running about on the big world map. And then when they went into their battles for the turn-based battles, they were 2D characters, 16-bit. And I loved that. I loved the fact that they said, no, our game's good enough to play without putting on these fancy 3D bells and whistles at the moment. The gameplay is solid enough, and the gameplay is absolutely solid enough. Now, the reason I say Suikoden 2 as opposed to Suikoden 1, or the first Suikoden, they're basically the same game. See, it's kind of like how I tend to think about it is Assassin's Creed was a tech demo, in my opinion. It was a great game, but there wasn't much to do. It was basically showing off the power of the PlayStation 3. It was showing you what they could do with the new graphics and the new processor.
Yeah. I would agree with that. Yeah.
And Assassin's Creed 2 was the game that they made from that tech demo. It's kind of the same thing with Suikoden and Suikoden 2. There was a bit more to the first Suikoden game, but Suikoden 2 is the same game, but they obviously had the funding to make the game they wanted to make the first time, because the story's almost identical as well. Now, what you do in Suikoden is you're a young soldier for the Highland Army, and in the middle of the night, the last night of your tour of duty, you're about to go home, your camp gets invaded by the enemy, and after that, you're running for your life. You're running for your life because you realise and stumble across the fact that it was your own country that set up the ambush because they want to start a war rather than go to peace. They don't want this peace treaty to go ahead. Anyway, this game, I could talk about the story for ages and ages. And I don't want to talk about it for ages and ages because I've just done it for the Nerdy Geezer. But anyway.
Right. Oh, right. Yeah, I saw that. Yes, I saw that video went up today, wasn't it?
So what it is, 2D role-playing game, Japanese role-playing game, turn-based, and turn-based is my favourite combat because it's like chess. you don't need the reactions, and I don't have the reactions anymore. And I know I don't have the reactions anymore because I try to play arcade games now and again. So
yeah, yes,
Whereas-
we've all been there, mate. Don't worry about that.
Well,
When we get older, it just goes, you know.
I mean, that's it. Yeah, the reaction time goes, and I might not be able to play Pac-Man anymore, but I can sit down with a turn-based RPG and think 10 moves ahead of my opponent. I can still outthink it. So I've got the mental agility. I just don't have the manual dexterity anymore. So I tend to veer towards those games. Not completely, but anyway, Suikoden. See, I'm off on a tangent. It's based on the Water Margin. If you know what the Water Margin is, it's a sweeping Chinese epic.
I don't.
TV show?
No.
TV show. I'm sure it was a book as well. I'm sure it's about, because it's an old traditional Chinese story. It's about a group of bandits who got together and then formed their own army to overthrow the corrupt government. And that's what the game's based on. You start off as yourself and your friend, and what you have to do is you go out in the world and you try and recruit an army around yourself. And to do that, it's... how do you describe it? It's such a complicated game. There's 108 Stars of Destiny. And the 108 Stars of Destiny are all just about playable characters in the game. And your character, his job is to go and find each and every one of them. Now, don't think about it like Pokemon, because that's what jumped to my head there when I thought there's 108 characters out there and you've got to go and collect them all. And it's, I suppose, in a way that it has sort of Pokemon elements, but they're real people, and they all bring a different thing to your army. Now, whether you can use them in your group to go out and fight in battles, or you can use them in big world battles, because as I was saying on Lee's video, there's more than one element to the battle. You'll know the usual RPG turn-based battle where you've got a group of characters facing a group of characters. They each take a turn to hit or defend. Well, in Suikoden, you had an army battle as well, so you could deploy troops. Now, it would depend on how many of the characters you'd found in the world. And you have to do quests for them as well. They won't just come and join you. You don't just go up to the first character and say, "Hi, right, this is me, come and join the army." It's like, no, before I do that, you need to find me this, or go and tell this person, or the usual JRPG tropes that you get.
Yeah.
But the story's, it's just so big. And the history in the game, like most of the JRPGs are the good ones. If you find a book in a room, you can read that book. And there's a lot of that. And not only that, the non-playable characters and the characters that you're fighting against, they will have lore and story. It's just so complex. I mean, if I was going to advise anybody, if they wanted to know anything about Suikoden, there's a channel, Brew United, and he sat and played the entirety of the first one, Suikoden, in 10-minute chunks.
I've seen. It's from Canada, is he?
No, he's USA. He's definitely in the USA.
Okay,
he's not Canadian.
I know. I've seen his channel, but yeah.
And it's the only way to get to grips with it. Now, the reason I would take it is because the 108 characters, well, they're hard to find, and you've got to go out there and find them, do their quests, and go back. And I have never done it without the internet. Never once completed that game without the internet. If I was on a desert island, I would have the time to say I didn't need Google to get me 108 Stars of Destiny in Suikoden 2. And that's the reason I would take that.
It's a good job, because you saying get rid of the internet a few minutes ago.
Yeah, get rid of it. I'm not going to have it if I'm on the desert island. So,
well, you wouldn't, but you wouldn't have been able to complete that game without the internet anyway, would you?
See, I think the internet made me lazy on it.
So the pain of being away from the internet will, as you said quite rightly, will allow you to
allow me to play that game the way it's supposed to be played, rather than
played it 25 years ago when it came out on.
Yeah, because even back in '98, I mean, the internet wasn't what it is today. But you could still download that and print that off. And I'm sure I had, folders full of walkthroughs for the likes of Suikoden so you could play through it. But I'd love to take it on a desert island, and I'd love to play it without assistance and without having the assistance there and too easy to get, because you'll just turn to it every time. Absolutely. And it makes me sad that I've never done that.
I mean, again, it's one of these great sprawling games. I mean, you said it really well. I mean, it's not my sort of game. It is just I just don't like the turn-based strategy. I've tried to play games like that, and it just doesn't work in me at all. I just can't be getting on with it. But again, I like what you said there about these are the sort of games that you could play now. Now your reactions are not quite what they used to be, which happens to us all. You know, I've got the same problem as well, and a lot of gamers will talk about that as they get older. Their reaction times go. So this is the sort of game where you can take your time. As you said, like chess.
It's like chess.
But again, I don't like chess, so it's going to be a game, sadly, which is going to be wasted on me. But I know there's a lot of people who enjoy this series, and you speak very passionately about it. And again, that's what I like to hear when people talk about the games they pick and the reasons why they pick them.
I mean, it's just a fantastic game. But I mean, there's so many great JRPGs, and it's the stories that I love in the JRPGs. Western RPGs I like for a different reason, but we might get into that.
I've got a couple of JRPGs knocking around, but I like the style. The style you mentioned there about the pixel art. I love
16-bit pixel art.
I love that. Absolutely love it. And
the fact that they chose to do that rather than go. I mean, they did further down in the line in Suikoden. Was Suikoden 3 and 4 and 5. They were all 3D games on the PlayStation 2. So, I mean, by the time they got to PlayStation 2, they had to do 3D, or they felt they had to do 3D.
But the fact they still did that for the second game in 1998, you said, it's a great art, and I think that when you think of JRPG, you either think of the big, overblown, sweeping graphics you get now, or you think of something like that. It's one or the other. It's a great style. Love the art styling on those types of things.
Yeah, and I would take it out every day of the week, the pixel art, especially when it's a story-based JRPG.
It's like when they changed the graphics from on Zelda, didn't they? For the Wind Waker, they made all cell shaded, and there was all sorts of uproar at the time. But I like that.
You see, I couldn't really comment much on that because my experience with Nintendo, you could fit in a thimble.
Yes, well, as we go through your next section of gaming history, we can see why with that. But I just remember there was so much overblown stuff at the time. Oh, they've done this. It looks terrible. It looks like a cartoon now. I thought it looked great. But then again, I do like some weird art styling, so I'm probably in the minority on that one. Right, so that's half your top 6 done. So we'll come away from there. There's still 3 cracking games to come on that, which I'm very interested to hear about. Again, one of them, because I don't know an awful lot about it. Let's jump back to your gaming history then, Stuart, because there's bit of a theme will start developing as we go through this, but
there will be a theme.
There's definitely a theme coming, but let's go back to the sort of start of this one. So after the Spectrums, you then moved on to
the next. Well, after the Spectrum is everybody has that period of time where they go away from gaming.
Yes, been there.
And I think I had that for about, it must have been a whole 6 months or something like that. It wasn't very long.
So as long as that.
I got rid of the +3. I said I was done. I didn't want to game in home anymore. I had better things to do. What, in 1990 I was 17, so maybe alcohol had started coming into the mix, and maybe the opposite sex.
Yeah, there's probably a good chance about that. It would be about right.
So just sometime in 1990, the Spectrum, I just gave it away. +3. I'm done with it. Can't even remember who to.
Oh.
It just went. I was done. And then what happened was coming up to Christmas, when was that? 91. My brother was getting a Mega Drive for his Christmas. And my dad said to me, come on, we've got to go and test this, make sure it works, before Christmas. And I go, oh, okay. I'm not really playing games anymore, but so we sit down and we went to my grand's house because that was a way, nobody was going to stumble in, and it's plugged it into the old CRT, put in Sonic the Hedgehog, which I believe it was a pack-in game with that anyway.
That's right.
Turned it on, and that game just blew my mind all over again, because that was the first time I'd seen arcade quality in the home. So coming from, the Spectrum blew my mind. Yeah, all these games, they're not quite as good as arcade, but they're all these games and we can play them at home and they're definitely good enough. And I can see myself throughout the years building to the point where the Plus Suite went away and I was done with it because it wasn't taking me anywhere. And then again, my dad, he obviously decided the Mega Drive was for my brother. And he said, right. And we sat down, and when I watched Sonic the Hedgehog, the speed of that thing just, I couldn't. And we were only playing it in 50 hertz. I had no understanding at the time. If I was sitting in an American house watching it at 60 hertz, it was even faster.
I know.
Because the speed of it blew my mind. It was like playing an arcade game in the home for the very first time.
Yeah.
A proper, honest to goodness.
When I play games in 60 hertz, it's like, wow, this is slow down a bit sort of thing. Do you think your reaction would have been the same if you put Altered Beast into it?
We had Altered Beast as well.
Oh, right.
I played that and I thought, okay, it's a bit slow.
Yeah.
But Sonic the Hedgehog, after seeing the speed of Sonic the Hedgehog, and it was like, I need this. And I went and got my own Mega Drive.
Right.
It was as simple as that. I need a Mega Drive now. So out went the Spectrum Plus 3 for a matter of maybe 6 to 9 months, and then a Mega Drive. This is what I need in my life now. And I was back gaming again.
Yeah, it's one of my favourite consoles. I do love it. A friend of mine had one. A few kids at school had them as well, and used to hear about the games they were playing. And because a lot of us playing computers, we never got to half these games never came out on the own computers anyway at the time.
Yeah.
So my mate is coming to about Thunder Force 3 and Sonic, as you mentioned, and DJ Boy as well, the early titles that came out. And it's like, I've never even heard of these games. And we had to do with Zool on the Amiga, which, sorry, but I absolutely hate that game because it tries to be Sonic the Hedgehog and it just isn't.
It just isn't.
It's not the same. But I didn't play Sonic for the first time until about 1994, and it was still impressive then at the speed that it moved. And I played a lot of platform games up until that point. It was just like, yeah, this is really good. All these, and then Sonic 2, and just a great console, the Mega Drive. So many great games for it.
It was. It had decent games for it, and they were arcade quality. Now, the first time I'd played an 8-bit console wasn't until 1990 either, because I didn't see an NES or a Master System until 1990, and it was two different friends that had that. And on the NES, it was the Turtles game, the Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles, because it's the UK, and it's the one where you run about the world map and you go down sewers, and then there's a bit of platforming, and it's really tough. And I watched that being played, and I said, it's not much better than the Spectrum. Yeah, graphically, it's better, but it's gameplay-wise, it's not much better than the Spectrum. But I do like this joypad. I remember saying, I do like this joypad idea. This is a good idea rather than a joystick. I wasn't joystick either. I was keyboard from start to finish with the Spectrum.
Oh, really?
I played, and I still play on the keyboard, and I still use the old Spectrum cursor keys, which is 6, 7, 8, 9, and 0 for left, right, up, down, and fire.
Wow, that's something else, because I couldn't play games on keys at all, and so I was brought up using the joysticks.
Yeah, no, I never used it.
It took me a while to transition from a joystick to a joypad, but it's now more difficult to go back playing with a joystick.
See, I think that was why I enjoyed the joypad when I first got my hands on like the Master System and the NES, I can relate to this. This is like a wee keyboard. Whereas if you were using the joystick, it's all on the wrist.
Yeah.
Where I was using my fingers and thumbs to control the game. So it was a natural progression for me, and I thought that's the way to go. But that's me digressing again, because that's going back in time.
But it's interesting to know, because again, how many people play games with cursor keys, and how many people play games with joysticks? And
I mean, but as I say, the cursor keys on the ZX Spectrum are 5, 6, 7, 8. 5, 6, 7, 8, and 0. So 5 on the keypad is left, 8 is right, 7's up, 6 is down, and 0's fire, with space as an alternate fire. So I don't know how I managed to work it out, or it's all muscle memory now though. I can still sit down with the Spectrum and I can still play any game using those keys, and it astounds me. Because it's not even like QA, OP, where you've got a visual up and down and left and right. You've got your fingers along a line, and I can still, with great accuracy, even today, with my reflexes, work the cursor keys. But yeah, never used a joystick.
Wow. I find it much harder to go back and play a game with a joystick now, because it doesn't quite feel as responsive as you want to, because we're all used to using the pads now. And again,
and the analog sticks on the pads are fantastic on the pads these days. But that's the future. We're not talking about future yet. Yeah.
We've talked about standard kidney-shaped joypad controllers to the Mega Drive.
And it was a decent joypad, that one. I quite enjoyed it. And I will call it a joypad, because that's what they were. They weren't controllers back then, they were joypads.
Joypads.
Because it went from a joystick, it became a pad, so it's a joypad. End the argument, people out there, if you're listening.
Yep, I fully endorse that statement.
Oh, it reminds me of a funny story, because my dad also trying to teach me to drive not long after getting that, and he was so frustrated with me, he said, I wish I could put a joypad into this car and you would be fine. And I have never to this day learned to drive, so...
Have you not? Wow.
No, I've never put a joypad in a car yet. The second to put a joypad in the car...
Well, you might find it goes from steering wheels just to voice activation, or it drives itself, so you should be okay. Really.
I don't trust that either.
No. But you could sit there with a joypad in your hand and pretend to drive it.
Pretend to drive. Like you do with the kids when you're teaching them to game in the early days. An unconnected controller.
Oh, dear.
So, yeah, the Mega Drive was my next... it brought me back in. It probably wasn't going to take much to bring me back in, because I don't think I've had much of a spell where I haven't gamed at home. I mean, I hear people who they take a break for years, and I don't understand how they can do that, because it makes me feel itchy. I need my game.
Yeah, I think probably the longest I was out of gaming probably was about 3-4 years at a time. I've had 2 or 3 spells like that.
Yeah, no, I couldn't do it. I've always, I mean, it's just what I do to blow off steam. And I don't know whether it's because I've always gamed, even during the break. We'll call it the break, even though it was barely a blink of an eye. I was still going to the arcades and still playing on arcade machines. So it's not like I had given up in gaming. I'd given up in gaming in the home.
Yeah.
And I think that was purely because, well, the Spectrum had ended. It was 1990. It was the end. It wasn't going any further, not in the form it was in. Those Z80 processors weren't going to be able to satisfy us.
Nah, they weren't going to get any quicker, were they? Nah.
No, they weren't. It's just a shame that they didn't evolve into something else, but it would have been nice to have had a British console, a proper British console.
Well, there was going to be at one point, the Conics. Remember seeing that, mentioning the Conics multi-system? That was the idea of the big hydraulic chair and a monitor built onto it, and it was meant to be, it was meant to be British made, and it didn't get past the prototype stage.
Oh.
Probably a good thing, actually. It looked terrible.
But yeah, no, it's a shame that Sir Clive was out of the business by then anyway.
Yeah.
It was Mr. Sugar that had picked us up by then. I say picked us up, it's like I'm falling back to the old team. We're Spectrum and you.
Well,
yeah,
we have Amstrad to thank for the GX4000. Don't forget.
well, but it would have been nice to see if Sinclair, or what was left of Sinclair, go from. I mean, it was never meant to be a games machine. The Spectrum,
right.
It was a business machine or a home PC for doing word processing or spreadsheets, and it was never meant. He hated it. He hated the idea that it was a games machine.
Do you ever see that fascinating docudrama that was on BBC4 a few years back? I can't remember what it's called now. It got Martin Freeman and.
Yes, I did. It's fantastic that.
I learned that from there about it wasn't meant to have games on it, and because he absolutely hated the idea of games for it.
Well, that's why he was going down the quantum leap, the QL route, because he wanted to establish the company as a business machine. He wanted to compete against IBM, which is a shame, because if he had competed against Nintendo and brought out games and gaming machines, he'd have been, it would have been, if only.
Yeah, and then he went and built the C5. So,
you know what? I quite like the C5. And I don't know if that's just my Sinclair bias.
I don't know. When I first saw it on the television when I was a kid, I was like, wow, we've got little cars we can drive around in. This is brilliant. And then you realise that they were so expensive to get hold of. And
the battery lasted for 2 hours. And,
you couldn't go very far in them. And
trucks couldn't see you.
Yes, yeah. A lot of Sinclair owners died. C5 owners died in their C5s.
Oh, but, I could imagine.
But and they were the ideal shape to be buried in at the same time as well. You just put a plastic bit over the top of it, and that's it. So yeah, very handy.
Yeah. Anyway, look at that, straight back into Spectrum. So yeah,
back to your roots.
So had the Mega Drive for a bit, but it wasn't going to be my sole gaming machine, because it must have been what I was about 2021, so 93, 94. It was my girlfriend at the time, her dad bought an IBM compatible PC. I'm sure it was a 486 processor that he had. I know, I'm positive it was. It wasn't Pentium yet. And he let me use that, and he let me use it for games. And that's where I got introduced to the likes of just SimCity. I mean, I know SimCity were in the older consoles, but proper SimCity and what other games I played? The Quest games, Sierra Online games, so King's Quest and Police Quest.
Oh yes, I remember
Space
those.
Quest. I mean, if they released a game and it had Quest in the title, I was guaranteed to get it. It was as simple as that. So I was playing a lot of strategy and real-time strategy, like Command and Conquer and the likes, games like that, Age of Empires. Tons of stuff like that. Tower defense games like Castles and Castles 2 and space strategies. What did I play? Masters of Orion and I mean, I've still got most of these games on the PC I'm running just now, and it's one of the things that I love about the PC space is the games that were released back in 1990. You can still play on your current PC today.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought a lot of them were obsolete, but evidently not.
No, because I mean it's the same argument I have when I hear Sony saying that they can't do backwards compatibility because it's too complicated. It's not. It's a program. It's a piece of software, and in the PC that I'm running just now, it's Windows 10, and it's quite high powered for what it is today. There's a program called DOSBox that runs Microsoft DOS within your PC. And if you have an old DOS game, it runs on that. So it runs on a program inside the program.
That's dead easy then, isn't it?
They make it dead easy, yeah. And the modders and hackers out there make these things for us. I mean, DOSBox wasn't like Microsoft saying, I tell you what, you want to play your old DOS program files? We'll give you this. No, it was a hacker or a modder who said, I want to play that game. I'm going to write the code so I can run DOS within Windows, or Windows 10, I should say. So I was playing tons of games like that and bouncing back to the Mega Drive for an arcade fix. So I was playing Desert Strike. I loved Desert Strike, and we played a lot of the football games amongst the friends that we had. Actually, there's one thing that I'm missing, because right about this time, 1993, a friend bought an Atari ST, and he bought it.
Yeah.
He bought it for one purpose and one purpose alone, and that was Championship Manager '93. And that could have changed me. I could have went and bought an Atari ST for that game alone, because he would bring it to either my home or we'd go to another friend's home, and we would stay for the full weekend and stay up that full weekend playing Championship Manager '93. And you would need the four of you in there, because the wheeling and dealing that we done between each other live on the fly, rather than playing it as like a simulator alone, it was unbelievable. I think the only reason I didn't go down that route is because you needed your friends with you all the time to play it like that.
Yeah.
I could happily sit and play Championship Manager, start a season and play it myself all the way through. But when we had four people in playing it live, and we're, doing deals between ourselves, like we're real managers, of Tranmere Rovers or Torquay. I think Torquay was one of my favourites back in the day.
That's brilliant. That's getting to get the full proper experience. I mean, I used to play Champ Manager with a friend of mine as well. Wasn't quite the same, because we always tried to outdo each other, but that's because we were so bloody competitive. Had we taken your approach, it might have been a different story.
Yeah, well, I think what would happen between the four of you is that, maybe one or two of you would have an idea that one of you could win and one of you couldn't, but we could stop, the other mate from winning. So it got very political. but good fun, and such a good game, Champ Manager '93.
It got better and better after that. I think it was '93, '94, which I think was my favourite of those early games. We had the data disc that came out as well.
Yeah,
and that was the first version out of that, and that is like, wow, you can update all the transfers. This is great.
It wasn't the first. Yeah, it wasn't even the first. Look, I'm going back to Spectrum again. I played Football Manager when I was like 10-year-old.
Yeah.
The first Football Manager, and loved it. I should have known back then that I was going to veer towards strategy and management in my gaming. I should have known.
Well, the thing about Champ Manager was the detail it went into. I know the current games go into way too much detail, and that's just too much for me. I'm just not interested in that. I'm much more interested in just the football side of it. The fact you can negotiate the transfers. I liked it later on when you could actually give players free transfers.
Yeah,
that was great. So I used to get rid of players I didn't like.
Well, that's it. You just get rid of them. You don't need them.
Yeah, become manager of Newcastle and give Alan Shearer a free transfer just because you just don't like him. It's great. That was. He's getting great. Yeah, okay. Don't cost me £1.5 million to give him a free transfer. I don't care. Let him go.
Don't like him. Go.
Yeah,
sounds like real management. So.
Yeah, but one thing that always used to get me on those early versions of Champ Manager was as soon as a player got the 31, his value would plummet. Because I there's a certain system I used to play with the midfield attacker in a certain position, and they always scored loads of goals. And just picking this one because I just remember it, I had Nigel Clough playing in that position. That's how far back we go in here, and he scored about 45 goals the one season, and he would do it for 4 or 5 seasons. But as soon as he hit 31, we went from being like a £5 million rated player to 250,000.
Yeah,
because he'd hit a certain age, and I always thought that was wrong. That was.
I mean, that's just a limitation to the programming. So
yeah, it's a bit of a shame that.
But I haven't played any of the current Football Manager games. I have seen them online, and they look far too complex. They look you have to just manage everything.
Well, I had a conversation with Big Game Al about this because he was on about Premier Manager 3, I think it was. Because he said he put a lot of time into playing that, But he said, "Oh, you do all this. You set all the prices. You buy all the food." And I thought, I don't want to be doing that. I just give me the team and some money, and I'll manage the team. Thank you. That's what I'm here to do.
Yeah.
I treat it as a football. I'm a football manager.
Yeah.
Because I'm not. I'm not going to buy a game
You're
called
not,
football and catering manager.
you're not the Bovril guy, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I can see why people like that, because Al's reasoning was fair enough, with the fact that if you didn't generate the income for the club, then you couldn't get the money to buy the players. So I can see that, but I'm
But
not
it sounds like
interested
a
in that
different
sort of thing.
game. I mean, it sounds like I would enjoy it, but it
I think
sounds
you
like a
would do.
different game.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds more like. I mean, there was football director games as well, where you did what your job was. You weren't managing the football team; you were managing the football club.
Yeah.
So, football director was another game, and I remember playing that. But that was, you managed the ticket prices and upgrades to the stadium and sponsorships and stuff like that. So, but I
And
wouldn't want
tracks.
that in a football management game. I'd want to concentrate on the team, you know, the training, the coaching, and then the match day. So,
And I used to love Tracksuit Manager as well, because I think that was international based. And a friend of mine had that. We used to play that for ages. It was great.
I'll tell you one that I loved back in the day, and it was Brian Clough's Football Fortunes. That was part computer game, part board game.
That's right. It was, yes.
Oh, that was fantastic. Me and my mates, well, we couldn't have been that old. We'd only be about 11 or 12 at the time when that came out, I would imagine. But we loved that because it was a board game and it was a computer game at the same time. And it had some horrific events in it as well, like your team has died in a plane crash. And it was like, well, what do I do now? You've got no team. You have to start again. It's like, but
That's a
I haven't seen
scenario
that
which,
for a while. I
yeah,
haven't seen that game for a while.
I've heard of that game. I knew there's a board game about it as well, but I don't think I ever played that one.
Yeah, board game and the Spectrum game, and you played them both at the same time, obviously. So that's taking me back now.
I was going to say, yeah. Right, let's come back from our management tangent. So PC gaming, lots of.
So yeah, lots of management games, lots of
RPGs
strategy
and,
games, lots of tycoon games. You know, if you put tycoon in the title as well, I was in there, like
Zoo
Transport Tycoon. Oh, I could play that for years.
Yeah.
And that is literally putting down roads and bus stops and railway lines and airports. And what I loved about that was, though, if you put a bus stop at a small hamlet and then connected a road to a larger city, you would see that hamlet grow in size. You would see it develop. So it was like SimCity, but you weren't controlling the city. You were controlling the transport routes, which would have an effect on this small village at the time. But yeah, anything like that. And as I said, dipping into the arcade and the sports games on the Mega Drive.
Yeah.
Yep, and that's the way I played until 96.
And then, like a lot of people, this new machine came out and took everybody by surprise and changed the face of console gaming, I suppose, in a way, because it pretty much spelt the ending of one of the systems or one of the companies that were involved in making consoles, and ushered in a completely new era.
It really did. It came out of the blue. I mean, how do you describe the impact that the Sony PlayStation had on the gamer? I mean, it was huge.
It was massive, absolutely massive.
I mean, as I said, I was PC gaming, and the PC games, the graphical fidelity was better than the PlayStation, and the sound could be better, but you had to pay for that. You'd need to buy a decent sound card. You would need to buy a decent graphics card. What the Sony PlayStation managed to do was put a PC in one wee box that you didn't need to worry about. You didn't need graphics cards, sound cards. You didn't need to worry about running various programs or other various programs. It was a PC gaming machine, and it was the first of its kind. I mean, that's the way Xbox went, but that's what it was. It was a PC gaming machine. but all contained in one wee box, and you didn't need to worry about it. And that was our biggest achievement. That took me away from PC gaming. And purely for the fact was, as much as I loved the power of the PC, even back then, I mean, it's not easy to play. You can't just sit down on your couch and play a PC game. You've got to be at your desk. You need a keyboard and a mouse. You need certain programs running. You need the right graphics cards and the right sound cards back in the day.
Yeah.
And that needs all to be there, and it needs to be maintained. And then sometimes you need programs running within programs to run the program that you're trying to run. So it's not easy. It might be the best, but it's not easy. And what Sony managed to do was saying, this is just almost as good, and all you have to do is plug and play. And that was it. Without a doubt.
It's one of the, I think maybe two consoles I bought from you. And I was after working for about 3 months or so. My first wage package went on a PlayStation 1 with a new telly and a stereo system. But yeah, because a friend of mine got one, and he showed me it, and I was like, God, this is quite good actually. I don't want to admit it because it's my competitive friend. I thought if I get one of these now, you say, "Hey, you got one?" Because I got one. But I thought, this is too good to miss out on. This is the sort of thing. Now I'm earning some money. Now I've got money of my own. This is the sort of thing. Because I'm still living at home. You thought, I can buy this.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I did.
So yeah, it was the same. It was a friend that introduced me. He said one day at the blue, like, I've got this new PlayStation thing. Do you want to come and have a look? Of course, it's a new gaming machine. Now, I hadn't really been interested in any gaming machines because the PC was taking up most of the time, and the Mega Drive was enough for the arcade kick from time to time. But it's just, let's have a look. So we went, and the first game he fired up was FIFA 96, I think it was. Yeah, FIFA 96. And I goes, yeah, graphics are fantastic for a console. And the controller, that's quite nice. I like the shape of this controller because, you know, it's like the Super Nintendo dog bone, but it's got these two struts. So it sits in the hand better. It's a decent wee console. And then he put in Resident Evil. And that was it.
Yeah.
I watched the opening cinematics and I thought, oh, this is PC gaming. And then we played the game, and yes, it's cheesy, the dialogue, but it's funny because of that. And I think I was 23? So I kind of got the cheesy humour, enjoyed the cheesy humour. It wasn't supposed to be a scary game for a 23-year-old, but the first time you go through that corridor and the dogs jump through that window.
Oh, yes.
At that moment, I just turned, we don't need to play this. I'm going to get one tomorrow. And that's what I did. I just went straight out and picked up the PlayStation. And that was it.
Yeah.
There was no looking back.
Absolutely. I mean,
it was a PC quality gaming machine, but console, one wee box with a controller. And yeah, so much easier. And I think that's what attracts people to consoles rather than PC. PC gamers love how complex their machine is and how much work they have to put into it, where console gamers tend to love how easy it is to sit down on a couch and press play.
I completely agree with that. It's so much better that way. It really is. I get why people play PC games, and there are complete nuts out there in terms of getting the PC specs right and having the best way to do it. And again, I don't have an issue with it, but that's just not me. At the end of the day, I want something I can just turn on, plug in, pick the controller up, and I'm off. That's what I want, you know. And yeah, but I can see why people do it.
I mean, yeah, I still PC game, but when I say a PC game, the majority of the catalogue of games I've got come from between 1990 and 1995. So it's not quite like PC gaming as PC gamers play today.
No, that's a completely different kettle of fish. Gaming PCs, and
I've got a retro machine.
You have to have something really high spec to run something properly, and As you said, you're fitting them around
that's the
with it.
thing. They don't really need it to be that high spec to run the game. They want to do it because that's how far they can push their system, and understand that. It's kind of like people who are into cars, I suppose. Proper, gas heads that
Yeah.
they want the turbocharger or whatever wheels that they want, and that's what the PC master race like to do. It's not so much about the game; it's about how much they can push that machine. And I get that. I totally get that.
Having worked in sort of beverage market for a while, there are people who are exactly the same about coffee as well. Complete lunatics about coffee, about how it should be ground and how the water should be done and how it should come out and how this should come out the oh goodness me, go away. If you're spending £1,000 on a bespoke machine like we used to make and sell, then that is the best machine on the market. You're not going to make it any better than that. And the people would still come and have a test of it properly and say, no, well, this could do with tweaking. Piss off,
Actually, for £1,000, I would expect the coffee to be made and ready for me in the morning when I woke up.
I'd expect to be doing everything else, yes. Waking up with a personal alarm message and
it went to work for me,
and then turn itself on just in time for you to get home in the evening when you finish work. Yeah. Oh, absolute lunatics, some of these people. But yeah, I get it.
But that's it. Yeah, we'll have their things, and I think console gamers like things. Not easy, but accessible. As much accessibility to a game as possible. And I think the internet takes it away as well.
I mean, you're related to this as well. There's nothing more, if you think about it, if you went to a friend's house or they came to your house when you were playing cassette games and you want to play a game, you put a cassette in and you're waiting 5 to 10 minutes for it to load. And sometimes you then have to turn the tape over and load the second side.
Yep.
So when people come to your house in the console era, can we play this? Yeah, no problem at all. Click, 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 gone. You're on.
Yeah.
Not, I'll just put it in here and I'll press play and we're going to have we'll read this magazine or, whatever.
I mean, don't get me wrong. There's pros and cons to both of that because we're heading that way just now with the modern consoles. You can't just put a game on now and play.
Yeah.
PlayStation 3 was okay. There was still a lot of updates to games with the PlayStation 3. PlayStation 2 was the last time that you could put, on the Sony side, put a disc in and play a game.
Yep.
Which is a shame.
Right, yeah.
But that's the internet again. See, the internet. The developers can say, no, we'll give them, half a disc and they can download the rest of the disc.
It's the root of all evil, the internet. But, I know what you mean about the modern games. I mean, when I first got my PlayStation 4 and I put FIFA 18 in, I'm on the 500 gig version I got, and I thought, it's a 50 gig game. This is downloading a 50 gig game. I'm going to sit here and wait. Oh, what? When did this become difficult? It shouldn't be this difficult.
Did you say on the PlayStation?
PlayStation 4, yeah.
On the PlayStation 4, you would try it on an Xbox One, where it wouldn't even let you play the game until it's downloaded just about everything. I think
it was just saying a PlayStation 4.
PlayStation 4 will let you eventually play while it's downloading in the background. Xbox can be torturous for
still much longer than I'd like to wait.
That's it. It's a football game. I want to put the disc in. I want to kick the ball about for, the 10 minutes that's meant to be 90. So, and that's it.
And even then, when it did start, it was just going to be in the middle of a game or something. I didn't quite get that. He sort of took over Ronaldo playing for Real Madrid halfway through a game. I thought, what the hell's going on here? This is I don't know. That's why I tend not to play modern games very much, because they confuse me. That might be my age as well. I don't know.
No, modern games are okay. It just depends on the modern game. So yeah, the PlayStation. That's
PlayStation
where I went.
1, yeah.
It brought me back to consoles. It took me away from PC gaming. Not completely. As I said, I got rid of a desktop PC and I got a laptop PC that was capable of gaming games from the early to mid-90s. And all my PCs from then, that's what I care most about. Gaming on a PC. It's those those early games, retro games. So
retro PC gaming. There can't be many
Retro
people.
PC.
I don't know for a few people who do that, but you don't hear a lot of it now.
Nah, it's okay. I'll keep the flag flying for that one.
I was going to say keep the home fires burning on that one. So PlayStation 1, we've established that was brought you back into the folds of gaming.
And it brought me into gaming probably much more than I did even with the PC gaming. Because it was whole new worlds. I mean, Resident Evil there was a game that I could complete in under an hour and a half.
Right.
But I would play it again and again to speedrun. I suppose when you're 23, you know, that you still get that kind of fun out of being able to beat a game and go back and beat a game. And Tomb Raider, oh my goodness, Tomb Raider was fantastic. And Final Fantasy VII opened up the world of JRPG. And then I just went on a hunt for that. So
yeah. So it had a big effect on you then.
Oh, it had a huge effect on me, yeah. I wouldn't have played those games on a PC. I wouldn't have played Tomb Raider on a PC.
That's interesting.
I use a keyboard and a mouse on a PC, and I know people are good at that for first-person shooters and the like. I've never got used to it myself. I'll play the strategy games and the games where I can take my time over the keyboard and mouse, but if it's action, give me a controller. So
that's fair enough. So many great games that system as well. Just a lot of nostalgia. Even the game cases. Just as soon as you see a game case for a PlayStation, it's like, oh, that takes you back. I've got to go have a look at that. What it is, even if it's a Madden game or a FIFA game, just think, yeah, I had this or whatever. And again, when I first played a Madden game, so I'm a big American football fan. When I first played Madden on the PlayStation 1, it was just amazing. You had like introductions to the games with the commentators, and they'd sort of discuss tactics before the game started. And it's like, wow, this is just something else. Just
the
love,
PlayStation.
Yeah, absolutely love PlayStation 1.
It was a game changer. I mean, a lot of people talk about what generation we're on now, Generation 9. I don't think we're on 9 generations of consoles.
Oh, I didn't even think about stuff like that.
I like to think about stuff like that. I like to see. I mean, obviously, the first generation was the Magnavox Odyssey, which was basically controlling a photon burst on the CRT. You weren't even playing a game. There was no scoring mechanism or anything like that. And then you had the Atari 2600 and the 8-bit micros and on and on. And they say there's been 9 generations. I don't think so. I might be making a video on how many generations we've actually had. Because I don't consider the PlayStation retro.
No, I don't either. I don't.
The PlayStation, yes, the graphics have obviously improved since the PlayStation was released back in 95. Tremendously so in sound and everything, but the gameplay is the same. The gameplay and the mechanics are pretty much the same as what we're playing just now. I don't think there's been much of a jump other than visuals.
No, I agree.
Yeah, those bells and whistles don't impress me as a generational jump.
Well, when people were trying to sell me on I said, well, what's different about? So I looked at the graphics on PlayStation 4 and the previous Xbox version and compared to the graphics in the new versions, and I thought, well, doesn't seem to be an awful lot of difference. There doesn't seem to be a big step up here to the next level. And the only reason people could give me the reason what the difference was the fact that the Xbox games loaded a bit quicker. I'm like, well, we shouldn't be talking about loading times in 2020 when it came out. We should be talking about, it should be able to do this. It should be able to do that, not it just loads the game a bit quicker.
Yeah.
As I said, it's not a selling point, is it?
No.
The new Xbox,
what you want is
the new Xbox, it loads games a bit quicker. I must have 10 now.
No.
It doesn't work like that. No. But I don't see a massive reason to. I've got a PlayStation 4, which I don't really play enough on anyway, and I don't see enough for me to sort of make a jump to PlayStation 5. But there we go. We've jumped forward a bit here. Anyway, Yeah, so PlayStation 1, we both wholeheartedly agree it's an absolute classic. But you stay PlayStation now, don't you?
I absolutely do.
Not immediately. You didn't jump straight in on the...
On the PlayStation 2, I did.
Yeah. Oh, you did? Yes, that's right. Sorry, I
Yeah.
got the wrong one. Yeah.
PlayStation 2 was a no-brainer. It was going to be backwards compatible to the PlayStation, so it was just an updated machine. And coming from a PC space, I knew what that meant. I knew it was going to have a better graphics card, basically. So the games were going to look better and run smoother. And I knew I was still going to be able to play Final Fantasy VII and Suikoden on the same machine. So it was like, okay, it's just an upgrade of the PlayStation. And that's what it was. It was an upgrade of the PlayStation. And had to get it. And, the games in that as well. I mean, what games did... I got Kessin on launch. I don't know if you know Kessin.
I know. I think I have Kessin. I think I've got one or two. I can't remember which one I've got.
Well, it's a real-time strategy game set in feudal Japan. So you're a general of a Japanese army way back in the day, and you command your troops, and that's it. Yeah. But I absolutely loved it because I'd never seen graphics like that before. Not even on the PC, because the PlayStation 2 was the first console that sort of was up there with the PC space. I mean...
Yeah, so I've got the first one, so I'm looking at it now because it's got the Japanese soldier down the side on it.
Yeah.
On the spine. So yeah, I've got that one. Sorry.
Yeah, so Kessin, I played tons of Kessin, and again there was a whole host of Japanese role-playing games on it, like Grandia 2, and Final Fantasy came out on the PlayStation 2 with Final Fantasy 12, and it was a no-brainer. It was an upgraded PlayStation. And I'd had the PlayStation for what? That must have been about 4 years, so it was due a replacement anyway.
Yeah. Did you get rid of the PlayStation or did you keep it?
No, I got rid of the PlayStation. I probably just passed that on to someone because that's kind of what we mostly did back in the day. I mean, I bought, as I say, I never saw an NES until 1990, but I bought one in, it must have been about 95. It was an NES complete with the Zapper and Duck Hunt Mario, the double cart.
Yeah.
And it was in this official grey Nintendo carry case. And I got it for a card boot sale in Newcastle for £5. And I took it home and I played it for maybe a day or two and gave it to a nephew.
Really?
I wish I'd kept that.
Oh, man. That would have been something.
But yeah, £5 from a card boot sale in 95 because it was the NES. Nobody cared about their old tech.
Well, that's why so many people have got massive collections, because exactly the same thing happened at the end of the 90s when the PlayStation era was in full effect. PlayStation 2 was coming out and everyone was just dumping.
That's what I gave away the PlayStation. I don't need it. Do you need a PlayStation? There you go.
And the thing was, PlayStation 1 used to appear everywhere. About 5-6 years ago, you couldn't walk around a car boot without seeing 20.
Yeah.
And people just couldn't get rid of them now. Very, very high price. The demand has sort of shot up again. So
I think COVID's had a lot to do with that. I mean, I think there's more people collecting, not because they want to collect, but they were looking for a bit of nostalgia at the start of lockdowns. And the big machines for nostalgia were the PlayStation and the PlayStation 3. Because the PlayStation 3 was probably the first time where there was proper graphics on a console.
Yeah.
Along with the Xbox 360. I mean, I will mention the Microsoft machines as well, but it was the first time that you had game characters that looked like people rather than the polygons of the PlayStation and PlayStation 2. So a lot of people have got nostalgia for that machine, and a lot of people have a lot of nostalgia for the PlayStation in that era. So obviously people ran out and bought. I saw it happen with the Wii. Wii prices before lockdown was you could get a Wii for £20 any day of the week.
Less than that, possibly.
Any day of the week.
20, anyhow. People couldn't get rid of them.
If you had £20, I'll take that Wii. And 6 months into lockdown, they were £80 to £100 online.
I know.
And CEX as well, they were £80.
Mm.
I was almost tempted to sell my Wii.
I must be. I've got 3 of them, and I thought, I could sell 2 of these. They're going to be cheap enough afterwards anyway. But I didn't.
And the prices are down again.
But I went out a couple of weeks ago. I think there was still about 50, 60 quid in CEX. But that's been 3 or 4 weeks.
They've dropped by about half.
But I mean, that's still
got a bit to go. Yeah,
still a shocking price for a system which 12, 18 months ago. You wouldn't be able to get rid of. You've been paying people to take them away. Usually.
That was it. You were just giving them away. It was...
I mean, I bought loads of cheap units over the years because people don't want them. I think,
Wiimotes were more valuable than the Wii console.
Yeah.
If you had a Wiimote and a Wii to trade in, sometimes it was you better value just trading in the Wii mote because you wanted the console.
Well, you see people pick these up at car boots. It's much easier to pick up a Wiimote, and there's always good trade value in that. That's what people would do. So, strange.
It is, but then again, this will all change as well. Things.
Oh yeah.
Things go up and down, peaks and troughs.
People will listen to this in years to come and say, "Huh, how much was a Wii back then? £80. Oh dear me."
Yeah,
they're giving it away free with packs of soup or something.
Oh, they're worth multi-million pounds and in museums because there's none left.
Yes, yeah. Well, that's very much my logic behind buying some of the stuff I do, because at some point, a lot of that stuff which people just consider landfill and complete rubbish is going to be gone, and there won't be any copies of them left. And I've seen that with we're talking about the Wii. Again, we're sort of jumping around all over the place here, but it's relevant. But My Horse and Me Too on the Wii, which I bought for 50p years ago. A few weeks ago, was going for about £10 in CEX, I think it was.
Yeah, I've no idea what it is with horse games.
I always know it's very, very early. Horse games, Barbie games.
Yeah, kids' toys.
Yeah, pick them up.
Especially,
late run sports titles, pick them up.
And to think, it used to be RPGs and JRPGs that done the money. Now it's a horse game or a Barbie game.
Yeah, it's not the same. That's why I mentioned it. That's why Al buys all those rubbish games, because at some point they're going to be worth.
They're going to be worth money,
because people are going to need them. But he's paying stupid money now for some of them. And goodness knows where they're going to go to.
Unless everybody's doing that, because that's what YouTube is kind of showing at the moment.
Yeah, that's it. So luckily I got in there first, because the more people buy those games that they keep talking about, the better my value of my collection's going to go up. So it's all right.
That is it.
That's why you get in there early. Yeah, so PlayStation 2 then.
Jump straight on it.
Yeah, I didn't get one until much later. I've never been a fan. I've always preferred the PlayStation 1 over it. I don't know why. I've got a massive collection of games, but I think it's one of those systems I really wanted. But then when I got it, I wouldn't say I was disappointed by it, but having had an Xbox original when that first came out, and having played on that and then got a PlayStation 2 probably about 3 years or so afterwards, I was a bit, I've seen all this before, so maybe I did it. If I had bought the PlayStation 2 first, I probably would have been a bit more into it. I'm not saying it's a bad system. I just it's good, but it's not my favourite PlayStation.
Oh, it's an absolute tank of a machine. No, it never breaks.
Well, the laser's a bit. I've had a couple of laser issues with mine. Certainly, I had to strip down and clean because it was getting a bit dirty. But I like the original. The fat ones, great. The slim ones, I can't be bothered with the slim ones.
The slim ones were amazing though when they come out. The thought that they managed to get that into that wafer thin mint,
Yeah, but it just felt so cheap and I don't know, flimsy to me. It's like the PlayStation, the PS1 when that came out on the sort of aspirin-sized one. I mean, that was a horrible looking thing. That was.
But I still want one today.
The grey one. No, I can do with that. I was going to say about the Master System 1 and 2 and the Mega Drive 1 and 2. Give me the original ones any day of the week. I don't want to see the second.
Yeah, I don't like the second ones when it comes to the Sega machines. I absolutely hate the look of them.
And the Mega Drive 2 is just like the most generic black console with orange buttons you're going to see your entire life. And messed with my system too. That flip lid. Oh, I've never liked that on that at all. But I never liked the PlayStation 1 redo, and I didn't like the Slims on the PlayStation 2 either. Give me the Xbox, the original Xbox, like a giant, great big brick of a machine.
Beast.
Yeah, absolutely massive. But I loved it because it felt like a sturdy piece of kit.
I think that's probably what I liked about PlayStation 2 as well. The original chunky PlayStation 2. It was less flimsy than it. I mean, I like the PlayStation, the original PlayStation, the look of it, the aesthetic. It's got the lovely circle right in the centre of the square, and they'd put a lot of time into the design of that. And PlayStation 2, when it released that was a big block. That was a tank, and it's pretty much fair because despite things that will obviously degrade over time, it was a fairly sturdy console, the PlayStation 2. And I've still got my aqua blue sitting down there.
Very nice.
And that's my main machine for playing PlayStation 1 and 2 games on. So,
Yep, it's nice. It's not. I've got a silver one. I've got a black one, and I've got a silver one. Silver one, I like the look of. Really, really nice.
Silver one's nice. Silver satin, yeah.
Yeah, and it's got the silver controllers with it as well, which is really nice. I think I got that for 25 quid in cash converters a couple of years back. I'm really pleased to get it for such a cheap price. I always try and buy a backup console if I can for the ones I've got. So if my original one breaks down, I've got another one handy. And I did just nice to get a silver one. I thought, and I actually use that one now more than the other one. I just like it better. Yeah,
you're not the only one that has backup consoles. I forgot how many consoles I've got in here.
Oh mate, I've got backups for everything.
Well, that's it. I don't want to be left with my gaming machine, and it doesn't matter what era it is. I want to play it. I want to play it then, so I need the backup.
Yep. Exactly.
Backups for backups.
But it's got to be done. I've always had this conversation. Why do we need two of these? Because in case the first one breaks.
Yeah.
Why do I need another set of bongos to the GameCube in case these ones break? And they're £1. I'm not going to leave them behind for £1.
Oh, absolutely not.
So we have bongos and we have emergency bongos.
Of course. And you never know, you might have Ginger Hippie Gaming over and he can show you how to play fighting games with bongos.
That's it. And what a marvellous peripheral those bongos are. They're brilliant. I'd say top 5 peripherals ever, that one. But that's a subject for another time.
Yep.
I love that. So we had PlayStation 2 and then you moved on to, eventually, PlayStation 3. Yeah.
Wasn't quite at launch, but it was very close to it. Obviously, the price was a concern because the price of the PlayStation 3 when it came out was what, 600-700 quid, and but it was backwards compatible, and it was an upgrade. And then I saw the trailer for Assassin's Creed, and that was it. I had to get it because I saw a generational leap again. PlayStation 1 and 2, there was a slight leap in quality, but it was still the same. It was polygonal 2D graphics. All of a sudden, the PlayStation 3, that Assassin's Creed trailer, it looked like playing a movie, and that was a dream. I mean, that's been a dream since the 70s.
Yeah.
We don't want to just play Space Invaders and Pac-Man. We want to play a movie. And when I saw that trailer, I thought, I've got to get it. I just got to have it in my life, and I'm glad I did because they're hard to get now. The original PlayStation 3s that are backwards compatible.
You're right, they are. They're very difficult to pick up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd buy the 8. Was that the 60 gig version, wasn't it? I think
it was a 60 gig. Yeah.
Yeah, because I had the 80 gig original, which was great.
See, I was really frustrated with Sony for taking away the backwards compatibility. Now I know they all play PlayStation games. It was just the PlayStation 2 compatibility they took away, but I was really frustrated. But then again, it was the consumer. Nobody was buying PlayStation 3s because of the price, but it had to be that price because it had 3 different consoles in the box. So
that's right. You think about it, for £200 a console, near enough, it's
Yeah, it was
a bit
fair
of
enough. Yeah,
bit
it
of a
was
bargain,
a
isn't it? Yeah.
PlayStation, PlayStation 2, and PlayStation 3.
And they got a
£600
Blu-ray player built in as well.
and Blu-ray player. I mean, that's probably the only thing that saved Sony at the beginning was the
I
fact
agree.
that it had a Blu-ray player in it, because nobody was interested in paying that amount of money for a games machine.
In a way, that's what swung it for us when we were debating whether to buy a 360 or a PlayStation 3. And it came down to, well, it's got a Blu-ray player in it. And knowing how much they were at the time, and the fact that was the next level for watching films, it then became, actually, this is a bit of a no-brainer, worth doing it. And honestly, I think over the PlayStation 3, probably not so much, but PlayStation 4 certainly has been, its sole function has been as a Blu-ray player.
Well, PlayStation 4, I hardly use it now.
Yeah.
But the PlayStation 2 as well was the DVD player.
That's right.
Which was another reason.
And I had the thing for the Xbox as well. We just put an adapter into the controller port.
Was that not? Oh yeah, you had to get an adapter and a remote and all that shenanigans, because Microsoft liked to sell people extra stuff.
That's it. But again, because I hadn't got a DVD player at the time, it was like, wow. So okay, so I think it was 25, 20, 30 quid, something like that, to upgrade it. But yeah, price of DVD players. The first DVD player I bought was 170 quid.
Yeah.
And then that got stolen. So
you see, that's where Microsoft have always failed, because they've got this PC background. They expect the people who buy their products to want to buy upgrades for the same product, where console gamers want to buy a console and that's it. The only thing that you're going to buy is an extra controller for your mate to play FIFA. And I think that's been one of the stumbling blocks for Microsoft, being one of the bigger ones. They've always wanted to, but now you have to buy this to play the Blu-ray, or now you have to pay this if you want, this. And
add-ons.
Oh, they've done it with the Xbox One Slim. The Kinect didn't have a port for it. You had to buy from Microsoft a connector to connect your Kinect to an Xbox One Slim.
I did not know that.
Yep. Huh. But when Sony released the PlayStation 5 that didn't have a PlayStation 4 camera port, they just told you to put in your camera's serial number and they'd send you the attachment free.
That's a difference, isn't it?
That's the difference, because Sony, I think, come in as into the console game space and have only been console game space. And they know their market want that contained box that does everything for them, and they don't need to worry about all of the rest. Whereas Microsoft are coming from a PC background that have a market that are used to upgrading.
What sort of games did you play on the PlayStation 3?
On the PlayStation 3, well, all the Assassin's Creed games, all the Uncharted games, the new Tomb Raider reboot, when that came out, that was fantastic as well. I would have to look and see.
Without mentioning any that may be on your list upcoming.
Fallout 3. I played Fallout 3 to death. What games did I miss? I mean, I had Fallout 4 as well. Oh no, that wasn't for the PlayStation 3. That's PlayStation 4. We're on it for that.
Vegas?
New Vegas.
Yeah.
I played both 3 and New Vegas. Now they're slightly different games. I think I prefer 3 to New Vegas. And I think that's because you're a lone wanderer in Fallout 3.
Yeah.
And I like being the lone wolf.
That's the reason Mrs. Baird likes Fallout 3 over Vegas. She played Fallout 3 first, actually loved it. And I bought to Vegas and she was like, oh, it's not the same. Don't like all this, community type thing. It's much better when you're on your own, walking around and exploring. So
yeah, I was always irked when you got a companion that was wanting to follow you about. So
go away.
Yeah, I've got this sniper rifle that I've built and it's perfect. And just go away from me and I'll shoot people from miles away. And Final Fantasy games on the PlayStation 3. Yeah, there was some, but we'll talk about them later.
Yep. So, So many games like that system.
Warhawk. Oh, Warhawk. Now, there was a game on the PlayStation 3.
Was that the one that came with the headset for it? Or no, I'm thinking something else, aren't I?
No, I don't think it came. Warhawk was a third-person multiplayer shooter.
Oh, so I'm thinking of Tom Clancy's Hawks.
Oh,
Sorry.
SOCOM.
Yeah, there was early Tom Clancy game. It was called Hawks. I think it was a
just picked it up
aerial
a couple
combat
of weeks
game.
ago.
Yeah, aerial combat game. I think it was.
Anyway, Warhawk. Oh, that was fantastic. And I couldn't play first-person shooters because they give me motion sickness.
Right.
So I could only even watch people play the likes of Call of Duty, Black Ops, and that for about 30 minutes tops.
Really?
And I would have to go. Yeah. I'd start feeling ill, so I couldn't play that. But they released a wee game. It's called Warhawk. It was a third-person shooter like that. So I could play an online multi-shooter, but in third person, and it was absolutely fine. I played the death out of that. It was a small combat game, so you had two teams, the blue team and the red team, and there was vehicles, there was jeeps and tanks, and the Warhawk was a jet plane. Could never fly them. And you had things like capture the flag or zones where you would have to capture and control zones and stuff like that. And it was the first online game that I played on not any system, because I'd played some on the PC, but the things like Lord of the Rings, Battle for Middle Earth, which were real-time strategy online games where you would compete against other players. But for shooters, that was the first time I'd ever been able to play a competitive online game, and I loved it and played that to death as well. There was just so many for the PlayStation 3. They put out so many games. And I think when you get to, our sort of age, you've forgotten more than you remember until you sit down with Wikipedia. You know, on a bathroom break. ZX Spectrum games, and you flip through, I remember that.
Yeah, I know. I've done exactly the same thing.
That's it. It's just you've played so much that you've forgotten more than you can remember.
And the thing is, you sometimes remember games you never played before. You go, I remember playing that, and then I had that when I was young, and then you look at it again, and you go, actually, I don't remember that at all.
No.
I'm utterly convinced I played that, but I don't appear to have played it in the slightest. So that's happened before now.
I don't think I've ever had that experience, but it's quite possible.
It's a weird experience to have. Not many people have it, apart from me, by the sound of it. But you just convinced. Oh, I'm sure I had that. I definitely had that when I was a kid. And you go, no, I didn't have that at all. No. Somebody else had it. I played on somebody else's version, or I read about it in the magazine, or I played a demo.
Because there was magazines back in the day as well.
Yeah, demos and all sorts.
Because you couldn't trust the screenshots in the back of the cassette tapes, anyways.
No. Now, you could always tell looking at a certain system, and I think those are not the screenshots for this system.
Nope.
I'm not that stupid. I might be 11 years old, but I ain't that stupid.
Yeah, we're not that stupid.
Right, so let's jump out of the game history. So we've got a little bit left on that one. We'll say that towards the end. Let's go back to your 6 game list. So we're in the right era now to discuss these games, certainly.
Yes, we are.
And
we're in a more modern era.
Exactly. And your next choice, you swapped out Fallout 3.
Yes.
If I remember correctly, because that was discussed on when I was doing on a retro tip.
Yes, and let's face it, Fallout 3's talked to death.
Yeah. And I think the thing was, Pete was very good about that, because he actually swapped out one game and swapped another one in. So you're not the first person to do this, but I think you've done it for that reason. He talked about it at great length there. But I'm pleased you chose this one, because no one's mentioned this one before. So
that's handy.
Yep.
And the game number 4 is Mafia 3.
Now, number 3.
Mafia 3, number 3. Now, I avoided the Mafia games like the plague because I thought they were Grand Theft Auto clones. And with the exception of San Andreas, I cannot stand the Grand Theft Auto games. I've got I play games for story as much as for anything else. And I've got no interest in playing a character that I can't empathise with. And for most of the time in the Grand Theft Auto games, you're playing a bad guy, and you're playing usually a really bad guy. And as much as the gameplay is fun and whatever, when I get sucked into the story, I don't connect with the character, I'm not interested. So I avoided the Mafia games until Mafia 3 was free on PlayStation Plus. So I downloaded it and I goes, you know what? I'll give it its due. And I absolutely loved it because, like San Andreas, your protagonist is in a position that he doesn't want to be in. He's not the bad guy. He's been a bad guy. He's been to jail as in, well, CJ back in San Andreas, he was in jail, got out of jail, wanted to go to his mum's funeral and then jet off to, LA or whatever and get away from his life of crime, and was sucked back in by the bent cops. Mafia 3 is the same. It's about a young Vietnam vet who comes back from Vietnam. He's been a low-level gangster before he went, but coming back from Vietnam, he just wants to leave. He wants to come and say his goodbyes to his old crew and go. But unfortunately, circumstances mean that he's got to stay in. And he's more of a crime fighter than anything else. So that's how I picture him. Because, yeah, he's getting back into the life of crime, but he's doing it to bring down the mafia. He's having to build his own mafioso as he's doing it. And that's why I decided that, you know what, I can play this game, because the main character doesn't want to be who he is. He's doing this because he's either forced to be like this, or this is the only way he can get through to the other side. Whereas the other Grand Theft Auto games, I found that it was just too easy to put in, violent characters for the fun sake of it. But Mafia 3, so it is like a Grand Theft Auto game in many ways. And a lot of people didn't like it when it came out because they found it too repetitive. Because you would be clearing out one zone and then clearing out another zone. And once you'd cleaned out maybe 3 or 4 zones, you had to go back and repeat it for the bosses.
Right.
Now, I can see how frustrating that would get if you play it like a run and gun game where you just go in all guns blazing. But Mafia 3 is not supposed to be played like that, because your main character in Mafia 3, Lincoln Clay, he's an ex-Vietnam vet. He plays the game, or you should play the game in a stealth type style. He's much more effective when he goes in under the cover of night and plays as a cover shooter, or he can do things like the Assassin's game where you whistle and you can get a guard to come round the corner, much like you could in Metal Gear Solid. It's much more like a stealth game than it is a Grand Theft Auto, run in all guns blazing. I tend to find in Mafia 3, if you do that, it's much more realistic that if you go in and start shooting, then every bad guy in the vicinity can hear the gunshots and they all come running. Where you get these games where you think you can go in and you shoot a couple of bad guys in one room and they haven't heard you in the room next door.
Yeah.
Or
they're standing right next to you in some cases.
That's it. And they don't hear you until they see you. Well, in Mafia 3, it's not within that radius, and it's fairly decently programmed, because the second you let off a gunshot, everybody's interested and everybody's making their way to you. So it's a much more stealthy game. But it's still not the reason I'm going to take it, because it's a game that I've played over and over again. I've completed the main storyline and went back and completed it. You can complete it in different ways as well. As I say, he's building his own mafia. And to do that, he's taking down one section of the city's mafia and replacing it with his mafia. And again, in the next section of the city, he does that and replaces it with his own, team. Who were maybe former gangsters from another gang, or it's meant to be set in New Orleans. So you've got the sort of voodoo area, and you can take out the mafia there, and you can let the voodoo priestess sort of take over, and she's part of your gang, and she's going to look after that area. But then you can double cross them. You've got the choice in the game whether you want to finish it as you intended. In other words, take out the mafia and then off you go. or you can double cross the people that you've been building into your own mafia and kill all them and become the Don yourself. But that's beside the point. As I say, I've played it over and over again, but the reason that I would be taking Mafia 3 onto the desert island is the soundtrack.
Right.
Because the soundtrack is all classic rock and pop from pre-1969.
Wow.
We have got a lot of classics in there. You've got the Stones and Iron Butterfly and CCR, and there's tons. The Beach Boys. There's so much classic rock and pop from just before the 70s.
I like the sound of that.
And the soundtrack is fantastic. Oh, jump onto Spotify at the end of this and just do the Mafia 3 soundtrack. You'll probably listen to it all night. And that's why I'd take that, because I could drive, like in Grand Theft Auto, you can jump in a car and just drive about the city. Turn on the radio, so I could take myself away from being in the desert island, and I could be driving around New Orleans listening to the Rolling Stones or whoever comes up on the radio.
So that just sounds exceptionally cool in the first place anyway. Just driving around New Orleans listening to the Rolling Stones would be fantastic.
That's it. And that's why I would take Mafia 3.
Yeah.
For the game's great. I love the game. Played it to completion many times. Never finished it as a bad guy. I can't do that. I have never been the bad guy in any game I've played. Like Fallout 3, I've never blown up Megaton.
Right.
For anyone who's played Fallout 3, they'll know what I'm talking about. It's a town that you have the choice at the beginning of the game whether you want to destroy it or save it. And a lot of people go down the road of blowing it up for a laugh. I've never been able to do that. I can't bring myself.
Wow. This is interesting.
But I would happily just drive about this fake New Orleans listening to late 60s rock and pop.
Has it made you want to go back and play the other two games in the series or not?
I have done.
You have done, yeah. So you have done.
I have done, yeah.
How did you find those?
And they're okay. I mean, they're set in different time eras. They're pre-World War II and post-World War II for Mafia and Mafia 2. The game mechanics are the same, so I slipped into the game mechanics. I didn't quite connect with it as much as Mafia 3, and I think I was less interested in the music.
Right.
Whereas I'll happily sit and listen to, classic Stones or Beatles or whatever, listening to the 1940s music, 1920s music. It's fun. I could listen to it for a bit. I wouldn't take it to a desert island.
No.
And again, with the characters, they didn't want to be in the Mafia either. I think this has been a thing about the Mafia series, that they didn't want to go down the route that GTA's went, which is, you're a nasty piece of work, go and do nasty things, So yeah, I jumped on 1 and 2, and they were okay. But 3's my favourite by far.
Yes,
but again, it's the music.
I know, but I would go with that as well. Soundtracks sometimes are the best thing to have. You can't take an MP3 player with you. That's probably the closest thing you can get to having a bit of fun with that. Yeah, and you can pretend you make yourself a little car while you're out there out of sand and just pretend to be sitting in there driving around. Have your arm outside and that gamer in the background and just playing. It'd be fine.
Absolutely.
Good choice on that one. Okay. I'm going to go listen to that soundtrack now.
You should definitely listen to that soundtrack.
I'm going to that. That's sort of stuff I like. So lovely. Good choice there. Your next one then. Now we've had a few people mention this one on Desert Island Game before.
Of course, it's a great game to take on a desert island, and for me, because I've never completed this game.
Right.
I have put probably 1,000 hours at least into this game. Because I don't play this game to complete this game. I play this game to live in Skyrim. I take role-playing to a whole new level when it comes to Skyrim. And I'll be taking the Legendary Edition, the final edition, because in that one you've got the option to build your own home. And I have literally spent weeks just chopping wood or buying glass or blacksmithing just to decorate my home that I've built by myself. And you have to build it for foundations up. It's not quite as complicated as, you have to put every brick and mortar down. But yeah, you can get awarded a plot of land and you can build your own home on it and decorate it the way you want. And you can get married.
Yeah.
And you can adopt children.
It sounds like, up until that point, a really oldie worldy version of DIY SOS. So you're building your own house from the ground upwards, or or not quite homes under the hammer.
Oh yeah, I could see that. But as
medieval version.
Now, obviously, the point of Skyrim is nothing to do with building your own house. That was just a DLC that they threw in. But I'd never played the game to complete it because I enjoy being in that world so much. It's so rich. I mean, graphically, it's got nothing on the games that we have today. If you look at the likes of Horizon Zero Dawn and the new Spider-Man game, the graphics are nowhere near it. But there's just so much to do, and so much what people call busy work.
Yeah.
Stuff that you don't have to do, like cutting wood. I have literally spent maybe an hour or two chopping wood, firewood, to go and sell at a tavern, so I've got enough money to buy an iron bar to then create a piece of armour, because I want to upgrade my armour skill. Because it's one of the games, when you do something, that's how your stat increases.
Right.
You don't level up after, you've got 10 experience points, you're leveling up. It does that as well, but to get good at something in the game, you have to do it. If you want to be a good lock picker, you have to pick locks. Pickpocket, you have to pick pockets. If you want to be good with swords, you've got to attack with swords. Magic hit. And I've put so much time into that game. So much time without even thinking about the end game.
Wow. So all that preparation and gaining all those skills and etc. and just because it's got to be done, and you sound a bit like you immerse yourself into the role very, very well.
Yes.
Does that go back to when you played management and sort of, because when I go into football management games, I found everything was very, you were immersed into the role of being a manager, so you felt very connected to everybody who you were managing.
Yeah, I remember that well, playing the games. It's like your team was so precious to you.
Yeah, apart from Alan Shearer, but if you move clubs, you take certain players with you. Oh, they've done such a good job for me. I'll make sure you come with me and whatever. And
when you start a new game, you're hunting those players that were part of your team at the beginning. Later on to see if you can get them in it. Oh, yeah.
Exactly. So it's that immersion you get into it. It's like, it's all personal now. So
see, immersion is the most important part about gaming, as well as gameplay. But it's gameplay that helps you get immersed, because probably the first game I can remember being totally immersed in was Orbiter, which was a game in the ZX Spectrum. It was a Defender clone. And I had been playing it as a kid for, it must have been about 4 hours without realising I had been playing it for 4 hours. And it was my gran at the time had pointed out how long I had just been sitting playing the game. Now, everybody knows Defender. It's not a complex game.
No.
But that gameplay and that, it just sucked me in. It's the will and suspense of disbelief that you have at the movies sometimes, where you forget you're watching a movie. If a game can do that to you, and it requires a great deal of, dedication to the gameplay, but if it can do that to you, I'm stuck with that game for life. And lots of games have done that, unfortunately, which means, I can't always play Skyrim.
Yes. But I mean, again, it's having that immediate connection with it, and you can almost imagine. You said if you're not watching, you're watching a film and it doesn't feel like you're watching a film. That's because you feel there, and it's games are exactly the same as that. And games like Skyrim are perfect examples of it.
I mean, I've restarted it plenty of times. I've not played the same game for that length of time, but I always pick the same character build at the start, and I have never played any variation than a Nord who uses magic and swords. I've never been a stealth archer, and that will probably shock some people out there because apparently that's the favourite build, but no, I've never been a stealth archer. I've been a Nord who employs swords and magic, and every time I restart the game, it's the same way. Because once I'm in that world, that's where I'm just living in that world, and taking it away from this one that we're living in just now. So
yeah,
who cares about this one?
Exactly. I agree with that.
This one's not real.
Yeah, no,
Skyrim's real.
Much more fun this way. Yeah. Oh, I know what you mean. But yeah, again, it's a game's called a couple of times on people's choices so far, and I think a lot of people in the future will mention it as well.
Oh yeah, it's a game I nearly never played because I thought it was first person, and I couldn't play first person games. And it had been out for a couple of weeks, and people were raving about it. And I said to someone, I think it was just a work colleague who was rattling on how big and how majestic the game was, and I can't play it as first person. You don't need to play it in first person. You can switch between first and third. Now what?
Yeah.
You can do what? Why did nobody tell me this? Was
a light bulb moment? Yeah.
Yeah. Was Oblivion the same? Yeah, Oblivion was the same. Oh, you're joking me. I've never played Oblivion. And I have never to this day played Oblivion because I went straight into Skyrim. And I love Skyrim. Oh. As sad as that may seem.
No, it's not. It's every game you've spoken about so far, with everybody else who's gone on here, it's the passion, it's the belief, it's the it's difficult to put into words, but the connection. That's probably, I suppose, you just feel all those things coming out in what you're saying, and the amount of hours you sink into it, the amount of level of details and depth you go into to just enjoy playing the game and feel part of that.
It's it, and it's all down to gameplay.
Yeah.
It's all down to gameplay. If the gameplay is accessible and easy and you get sucked into the story, you're gone. And Skyrim's a great example of a game that will suck you in if you enjoy that style of role-playing, which is Western role-playing, completely different from Japanese role-playing games.
Yep, which is what you said earlier. That's right.
Yeah.
Many hours ago.
Because Japanese role-playing games tends to be about their story, whereas Western role-playing games tends to be about your story. I mean, you're playing the role. There's not usually a great story laid out for you. It's your path, your character, your build. You go, you make up what you're doing. Whereas in the Japanese role-playing games, there's a really complex story. It's probably filled with lore and history. It's so much that you'll never understand. I mean, Final Fantasy VII confuses people for decades. The story in Final Fantasy VII, it's still confusing. But that's the difference between the Western and the Japanese role-playing games. It's Western's your story, and Japanese, it's their story. But fortunately, they do a good enough story that drags you in, whereas the Western one lets you make up your own story, and that can be just as good.
I've never heard that explanation before, but that's really interesting to know. I've learned a lot today. I've learned a lot so far. It's been a very learning experience.
Don't do that at our age. When you learn something pops out the other side, and
it won't be anything. It won't be anything important anyway. All the important stuff. All the important stuff fell out a long time ago. That's why there's rubbish in here now. That's what it is. That's disappeared many years ago. Right, and let's move on to the last game on your list, because this is another one of these great sprawling character-based.
It's a Rockstar game.
Yep.
It's a Rockstar game, and I don't like Grand Theft Auto games, but you know what? They do Cowboys good. They do Cowboys really, really good. Red Dead Redemption, when that first came out, that absolutely blew my mind. And people describe it as, again, Grand Theft Auto, but on horses because you're a cowboy, and it's nothing like Grand Theft Auto. Again, you've got a character in there that you care about, that you can empathise with, because they don't want to be there. They don't want to be wrapped up in that life of crime. And the game that I'm taking is not the first one, it's going to be the second one. And the second one purely because, well, it's so much bigger and so much more complex, and it's so much more like Skyrim that I can also spend maybe... Now, how long did I spend the first time I played Red Dead Redemption 2? I spent about 6 weeks, and all I did was hunt and fish and camp out. Literally, any time I was on the game for about 6, almost 2 months, all I did was go out hunting for legendary animals or fishing, camping, make myself a coffee. Eventually, I would maybe ride into town to get a haircut and a shave, because if you get too shaggy in Red Dead Redemption 2, some people might not talk to you because they think, you're a bit dodgy. So eventually...
I have the same problem in everyday life.
Yeah. But yeah, it's such a big open game. And again, it's got a storyline like Skyrim that you can go through from start to finish. But for the majority of the game, you can just play it as you like. And I think, again, it's always been a thing that's attracted me to games where I can decide the path I want to go. I mean, that might go back to the old text adventures back on, the early computers, go west, can't go west, go north, can't go north, go east. You have been eaten by a dragon.
Yeah, for goodness sake.
Where you expected to be able to, you wanted to be able to do anything in those text adventures. You wanted to be able to type in, go find a horse.
Yeah. Where is this?
Yeah, but again, Red Dead, and it's stunning. And it's not a PlayStation 5 game either. It's a PlayStation 4 game. Now, I know there's not been a great leap in graphics between the 4 and the 5, but there has been enough depending on which type of TV you're watching on. But Red Dead Redemption it's such a stunning game, and the world's so big and wide, and so much that you can do without following the game. You don't need to follow the story arc for any length of time. You can get on that horse and just live like a cowboy.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what we wanted from gaming. It's role-playing.
Escapism.
Yeah. And I think, like Skyrim, I haven't got to the end of Red Dead Redemption 2 yet. And I probably will with Red Dead Redemption 2. I don't think I ever will with Skyrim. I don't think I'll ever finish that game. But Red Dead Redemption 2, I probably will, because there's a much tighter story arc. It's less loose than Skyrim. But I just like living as a cowboy.
So it's people who've got these games like that and Breath of the Wild where they just sort of spend hours walking around landscapes and climbing mountains or going fishing for hours on end. And it's an interesting way of putting it, because, as you said, it's not linear.
Yeah.
You've got this ability to just go off on your own and do what the hell you want. And I like the idea of having that freedom, that you're not dictated to following a certain path. You must do this, you must do that. No, actually, I'm going to go for a walk over here, and I'll go and do this, and I'll sort this out, and I'll pop over there. And the game's not going to penalise you for doing it, or find a way of bringing you back into it. It's going to be your choice. So he said, if you want to spend hours on end meandering around on the back of a horse, fishing,
can do it.
You can do it. That's perfectly okay.
Yeah. And what I'm playing just now, I'm playing Assassin's Creed Odyssey just now, which it's the same type of game. It's a huge open world game that you can do pretty much what you want to do, and it's set in ancient Greece. Fantastic. It's like going on holiday back in time. And the better the graphics get, the easier it is to immerse yourself. Now, I know graphics aren't important for immersion, not completely, but it gets easier when you look at your TV screen and it looks like Greece.
Did you ever play Endless Ocean on the Wii?
I did not.
You see, you might enjoy that, the first one especially, because it's basically an underwater exploration. We just go around taking photographs of fish and just scuba diving around for ages under the water, and you might enjoy that. For most people, it's a very sort of boring experience. But
It sounds quite laid back and relaxing.
It is. I was just about to say, very relaxing, and the first one's incredibly cheap. It's not difficult, hard to find, or expensive to pay. The second one, I think, is regarded as the better game because there's a bit more of a story to it. But the first one, yeah, you just go around taking photographs of fish and
that. Yeah, it sounds right up my street. Because at times I'll play a game to relax. There's times I want to play an action game because I want to get into the action.
That I think will be right up your street, mate.
Yeah, I will certainly look that one out and add it to the list.
There we go. Good. So those are your 6 games then, and I think there's plenty of time to be occupying yourself on those.
Be honest, between Skyrim and Suikoden 2, that would probably take up most of my time. Except for maybe Rockstar Ate My Hamster. That will definitely get some gameplay. It
depends how quickly the rescue vehicle gets there. If you're playing all those games, you may actually not have time to sort of set up an SOS thing or a fire or wave at a passing ship as it goes across in the distance.
It might also depend how close to getting 108 Stars of Destiny I am, whether I'll want saved.
Yeah.
Because I've only got a couple to go, and then I jump on the internet when I got on that boat. I'll have to go back.
I've completed that now. I need rescuing now. I'm going to play. I'll do some fishing for a bit. There we go. A couple more days, I'll be all right. Right. So before we get to your 2 games off the sort of odd list, I want to go back to gaming history. I don't want to talk so much about the PlayStation 4 and 5 because we've established that you're very much into that.
A Sony pony. That's what we call each other, and we don't mind.
But you did mention earlier on that you very much ignored Nintendo up until this point.
See, I don't think it's fair to say that I ignored Nintendo.
Right.
Nintendo ignored us. Nintendo didn't care about the UK, and it certainly didn't care about the west of Scotland. So as I said, the first time I saw any Nintendo console was 1990, and that was the NES, and I saw one game. Sega, however, they come in and they done a bit of a song and dance. So, we were more interested in Sega, but I don't think, I didn't ignore Nintendo more than they paid no attention to the market I was in at the time. So I didn't really walk down that route.
Yeah.
But I did, however, buy a Nintendo console, and that was the Nintendo Wii. And that was quite simply because it looked fantastic. The motion controls, it blew my mind. I know they tried it before in various ways, but to see, I saw Wii Sports being played before I played Wii Sports, and seeing people flying about with those, nunchucks and Wiimotes was just fantastic. And obviously I was much older at the time, so you're talking an adult who invites friends around to play Wii Sports. And to be fair, that was the market. It wasn't just a kid's console. It was a console that was going to suit every age group.
Everyone was doing it, yeah.
Yeah, it was a console that was going to suit everybody from, a 3 or 4 year old first, getting out there into the gaming space to, your old granny who could barely get out of her chair, could, maybe throw the Wii remote about. It was such a great console. A gimmick, and not as powerful as the other consoles that were coming out at the time. But that's always been Nintendo. They've always done something a little bit quirky.
Yeah.
And I kind of like them for that. They don't follow the trend. They don't just say, right, we need to make the next most powerful console. And if you look at their controllers, for example, I don't think there's been a single generation of Nintendo console that's had the same controller.
Yeah, you're right.
They have evolved every single time. Even that awful M-shaped Nintendo 64 thing.
Yes, horrible thing.
And then the GameCube controller.
GameCube controller was all right. I quite like that one.
It's okay. And I hate the Joy-Cons. Hate them. Too small.
Yes, they are a bit on the fiddly side, those.
At least you can use other controllers for that for anyone. I don't have a Switch yet. I intend to get a Switch at some point, but not at the moment. But yeah, a Nintendo Wii, and it was just purely because it was a party game console. So we all had party games back in the day, but we never had a console that was primarily a party game console. I mean, yes, I've got Twilight Princess and like, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. It was the first ever Zelda game that I played to completion, which is a great game, but I didn't buy the Wii for that. I didn't buy it for gaming. I bought it for the party games, for Wii Sports, Sports Resort, and light gun games.
Oh, yes. Which it was ideal for that, wasn't it? Absolutely ideal for those sort of games. Because that sort of genre had gone for about 10 years or so.
Well, that's it. As soon as we went LCD TVs, you couldn't play the traditional light gun games.
Correct, yeah. So you had all these House of the Dead and Gold. Not you had, what was the other one? Dead Space Extraction, which is one I always recommend as well. Ghost Squad, yeah, which is just. Oh, we took that. I always mention Ghost Squad. It's a fantastic game. Brilliant.
Yeah, it's a good fun game, and I've even got Link's crossbow training, which is not such a good game.
No, and you got all the Call of Duty games as well are on there, and you got Medal of Honor games as well, and Brothers in Arms, and
they've done their bit with it. But yeah, I bought it because it was a party machine, and still have it because of that. Because it's always fun to get Wii Sports out.
Never gets old, does it?
It's just a laugh.
Yeah.
It's just a laugh. You know what? It makes you move as well.
Yes. But you take it too. I was playing golf on it, and I was taking it far too seriously. And then you sort of end up as if you're trying to hit the ball properly. Yeah. And I did it 2 or 3 times, and I sort of like, God, stop doing that because my shoulder started hurt. I thought I'm taking this way too seriously.
Especially when you watch your 10-year-old kid come up and just flick their wrist, and it's a perfect shot.
Yeah.
You're lining it up, or you're playing tennis like you're actually Pete Sampras. You know. You don't need to do that, but it's still.
It's worse when you got the +4s on and the sort of the shirts as well at the same time. You take it a bit too
proper
seriously.
role playing. That's
it. Yeah, but the bowling was great. The bowl, because I used to do quite a lot of bowling myself as well, and I found that amazingly accurate. It was just, I thought, wow, this is actually really good.
Yeah, the motion controls, especially when they brought the Motion Control Plus out on the Wiimotes. I don't think there's been a machine that's done it better.
I think you're right. I think it was gimmicky and a bit quirky. Yeah, but
it was well made.
Yeah, and Sony and Microsoft since then haven't quite got that right. So I played a lot of Kinect. I don't like the Kinect. I think it's really good. There's some interesting games for it, but it's not quite as good as the motion controls on the Wii. I just find them a little bit off.
Yeah, and the PlayStation camera's only good for VR.
I've never played Move or anything like that. I mean, Move games or anything.
Yeah, I've played.
So I've got the facility. So.
Yeah, I played some of the Move games, and they're very gimmicky, and the Move controls, they weren't really well made. It was the opposite of what Nintendo done. But Nintendo, obviously, they knew what they wanted from the machine, and that's what they've focused on. They've focused on those motion controls, and then they've built out from there.
It was just a shame. A lot of developers got very lazy with the games that were ported out. More, not so much brought out, but ported over from other systems, and then had this motion control
tagged in.
On. And it just that's why the Wii gets a bad reputation, because people look at games like that and say, "Oh yeah, there's only bad games for it. It was a gimmick console." No, it wasn't. I'm not saying that.
It was a great console, and too many people, just threw out shovelware for it, which is the opposite of what Nintendo started, which was weird. I mean, Nintendo had an iron grip on their games back in the 80s. It was like, if you want to release on our console, it's going to have to be a top-notch game. And then the Wii came along, it's got throw out everything.
Yeah, but you find that, I mean, a lot of the PlayStation 2's got a lot of crap on it as well. I hate to say it. I know you like that system, but it's got a lot. It's got a lot of crap on it. Most systems got a lot of crap on them, but that one seems to get the worst flack for it, and it's not always the case. And people dismiss it, and they don't realise it's probably about easily a couple of hundred games for it. That if you're going to collect for the Wii and you want to collect the good games for it, those are the ones you need to get.
Yeah,
it's absolute top-notch titles, and there's probably some under there that you probably get on with as well. So, yeah,
yep.
It's I always hate to see it run down. I mean, people think I'm a massive fan about the Wii. I like the console like you do. I like the concept behind it. I like the fact it's fun to play on, and sometimes even the really bad games are fun for an hour.
And I love a bad game.
Yeah,
I'll play a bad game for the sake of it being a bad game.
Yeah, and if it's cost me 50p to pick it up and it's a bad game and I play it for an hour, then that's fine. I played Ninja Bread Man. Ninja, see how bad it was, and it was bad. It was really bad.
Bread Man.
Yeah, but I was there for an hour.
You wouldn't like that because you didn't like Zool.
Yeah, but it's nothing like Zool.
Ninja Bread Man was supposed to be Zool 3.
Was it? I did not know that.
That's why it's all candy canes and the like as well. It was supposed to be Zool 3 and something fell through, and they still had the guts of the game, so they just put in the Gingerbread Man. They couldn't use the Zool.
And they reskinned it twice after that, or before that, I can't remember.
And it's still not good.
Yeah, Rock and Roll Adventures. They just basically changed the main character and the sprites, and that was it. And also the infamous Anubius 2, because people think there was an Anubius 1, there wasn't. And that was exactly the same game reskinned in the Egyptian setting. And it even had the same music as Ninja Bread Man. That's how bad it was. Just lazy. And the great thing about it is the people who were behind that game, the developers, and they made a load of shit on the Wii. They were based about 3 miles from here, where I live. I know exactly where they were. They aren't there now. But I know exactly where they are. I've always wanted. I must go outside and just do a video to stand outside and say this is where Data Design Interactive used to be. As you can see, it is now a charity shop. But it's not far from a charity shop. But yeah, they brought out some horrid games. But they did bring them out the PlayStation 2 first, in all fairness, and then just ported them over to the Wii, and they must have got 20 games. Yeah,
it's like you say, there's going to be shovelware in every system.
Oh well, there is.
Well, there is shovelware in every system. With the exception of maybe the NES and the Super Nintendo, where Nintendo just refused to release games. That's
very true. But then again, I don't think shovelware was a term probably until didn't hear it till the Wii came out, really.
Yeah, I mean, it became popular with the Wii, but let's face it was the Atari 2600 that first had shovelware.
Yeah.
And that's where Nintendo learned not to do that, not just to let anyone throw out a game on the system. So
in a way, that was sort of right, really. So okay, so I say we'll gloss over PlayStation 4 because we have touched on that briefly. And obviously, where we've sort of done 3 hours again. So my hope of just getting one of these under 3 hours has gone out the window again. But again, but it's not a problem because it's great fun chatting. You're listening to what you're saying, your stories, your memories, and I'm sure people out there are listening to this and going, "Oh yeah, I remember that," and yeah, that same thing happened to me as well. And the odd tangent as well, which is always good. So we'll finish on these last 2 games then, Stuart. And
certainly,
firstly is the game that I say you've played before, you didn't quite get into it, you didn't like it, so you like to spend more time on it. You didn't spend enough time on it, you want to put some more time into it. That bracket.
Yeah.
And your choice for this one is
Final Fantasy 13.
13.
Yeah.
So I don't think I've got anywhere near. I didn't really know there was that many Final Fantasy games. So
16's due out.
16.
Good
grief! Blimey, I have missed out.
That's on the mainline games. That's not including all the other side games.
Oh, I don't count it. It's like these Zelda games, and I don't count these little side games.
So in the main numbered games, we've got 16 heading our way soon.
Good grief!
But Final Fantasy 13 was so looking forward to that game. I'm a big Final Fantasy fan. I love most of the games. With 13, it was unfortunately too linear. Apparently, now I haven't played 30 hours of it. I've only played about 10 to 15 hours of it. But apparently after 30 hours, it starts to open up into a more traditional JRPG. The beginning of the game, you're running down a corridor, fighting wave after wave of enemies. And I done that for hour after hour, and I got bored with it.
Right.
Which is a shame, because it does open up. It's just, just typical of Final Fantasy games, throwing you a curveball every now and again just to say, oh, you like Final Fantasy? Yeah, this is the next one. And I mean, it was on the PlayStation 3. It's a Final Fantasy mainline game. It's turn-based combat. It's everything I love. It's just It was too linear at the beginning.
I was going to say, it sounds like the sort of thing that appeals to you greatly. So
yeah, but too linear at the beginning. It was far too repetitive. Got bored with it. Went away. And then years down the line, you get people saying, yeah, but if you just play 30 hours, it starts to open up. And to be fair, for a Final Fantasy fan or a JRPG fan, playing 30 hours a game is not a big ask. It's, I mean, it's something that we'll do, before breakfast. 30 hours, no problem, mate. Here we go. Anything under 50 hours is a short game. It's like...
People tell me that all the time. Oh, if you put 200 hours into this game, it's much, much better. Oh, well, yeah. I'll just clear a space in, October, possibly the whole month, to sit down and try and play it so I can get some benefit out of it.
Yeah, that's the thing with the longer games, especially as you become an adult. You don't have the time to invest whole days. So it's whole evenings, or maybe getting up an hour earlier for work, or...
the trials and tribulations that you have to do to put in 200 hours in a game.
But as I say, we're going to retire soon, and we've got a wall of games. We're going to be fine. But yeah, Final Fantasy 13. It was, I think it was the first and only Final Fantasy game on the PlayStation 3. Yeah. Oh no, 14 might have been. Yeah, you might have been able to run 14, but 14 was an online game. It was a multi-massive online role-playing game. Never played that. I never played 14, but 13 was a mainline game. It was a single-player game, and it looks amazing, and it's got some great characters in it. But that first, apparently 30 hours, is just too linear. Had I known back at the time, I would have probably decided to grind it out, but I didn't, so that's why I want to take that one.
Yeah.
I want to get through that 30 hours. I want to see how it opens up and see how it plays after that. Because I love my Final Fantasy.
Yeah, that's a good enough reason to take that with you then. Yeah. It is things like that when they change things slightly, or add in slightly new elements to games that you're familiar with from previous ones, and you go and play the new one, and it's something slightly off about it. And you go, I've had that with games I've played before, and you just think it's just not quite the same as it was. Why I'm having to do this way this time rather than that way?
Yeah,
I've got to tough it. He said you've got to tough it out until you get past a certain point, and then all of a sudden it becomes hopefully more familiar.
Well, that's it. I mean, they've got to freshen it up. As I've said, there's 16 mainline games. If it was all the same game, then they wouldn't be selling. There's got to be tweaks. They've got to improvise. They've got to modernise.
Yeah.
But the beauty of video games is the older ones are still there. They're never going away. As long as we look after them, they're never going away.
Exactly.
We can always go back and play the old... You can't... It's like Final Fantasy VII Remake. Thoroughly enjoyed that. It's nothing like Final Fantasy VII. And it doesn't take anything away from Final Fantasy VII. You can still play Final Fantasy VII and play the remake. Two different games, kind of set in the same place and time with the same characters.
Right.
But yeah, they've got to mix it up a bit, but sometimes they mix it up too much. And I don't think they did with Final Fantasy 13. I think I just didn't have the time or the energy, maybe.
Yeah.
You know what it's like. Sometimes you come off the back of a game and go into another game, I don't know if you know that. Well, for
Yeah.
me, there's times where I'll come off the back of a game, want to jump into another game and not have the energy for it.
Yeah, no. Sometimes it takes far too much out of you to sort of do something like that. And I've had it before. I've started one straight afterwards and thought, oh no, I'll leave this for now. And
sometimes you just need a day or two just to,
Yeah.
not game. Oh,
That's right.
goodness.
How's that ever happen? Yeah.
Oh,
Think of the hours you've lost that you could have sunk into. I'm having a day off playing. That means I'm now 4 hours behind on doing this. It's 4 hours of fishing on Zelda I need to work in at some point. Okay, so Final Fantasy 13, that's going to be the one you're going to try and put some bit more time in and tough out those first 30 hours.
Yep. Get through that corridor and I'm going to let the game open up and become a proper Final Fantasy game.
Yeah.
So,
and you never know after those first 30 hours, you may find it's one of your most favourite games ever. But you won't know until you do that first 30 hours.
The people who have finished it rave about it. They love it. They love the characters. It got spin-offs. As I said, every Final Fantasy game's had a spin-off now, I think. You don't just get Final Fantasy 13, you get Final Fantasy 13-2 and Final Fantasy 13 Lightning Returns. And so it done well.
I think, the only one I've got is Final Fantasy X-2.
10-2.
10-2, I'd do it. X-2, it's what it says on the side of the spine. Which I just, for some reason, just bought because it was happened to be in a car boot sale. I've never played it. The closest I got to playing a Final Fantasy game properly was Kingdom Hearts, which I know isn't a Final Fantasy game, but it's got Disney characters in it.
Yeah, so, no, I haven't played it.
And I thought I must try this, and I got about an hour into it, and I was just nothing was happening. And I thought, you know what, I bought that with the intention of trying to give it a good go, and give this genre a go. And I just got that might be the game I would take with me, possibly. That might be discussion for my own Desert Island games if anybody ever wants to.
Does one for you?
Yeah, I might just interview myself. Actually, that's probably the best way of doing it. At least I know what the answers are.
Good enough.
The last game then is the game that you hate. We always like to finish on a down note. It's always quite a funny note and a controversial note sometimes, and the reasons people come up for it.
It'll be controversial amongst a certain group.
We've had a few so far. We've had a few.
The game that I hate with a passion comes from a series that I love with a passion, and the game that I hate is Final Fantasy VIII.
Right.
I absolutely detest that game. Now, of course, it was the one that followed Final Fantasy VII, which is probably the greatest game of all time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure a lot of people out there will agree. So maybe it was on a back foot then. But what happened with Final Fantasy VIII is, firstly, they tried to make it too realistic. They went away from a sort of cartoony fantasy look and tried to make the characters look real. Now, back in the PC, back then, that would have been doable. You could have had decent-looking human-esque sprites on a PC with the power of a PC. They couldn't do it now. There was... it's been memed, and I hate using the word meme because that's something my kids say, but it's been memed, the most handsome guy in the place, because that's one of the lines, is one of the characters come in and sees the main character of the game. And of course, his face is a pixelated mess because they just couldn't do a human face. It was horrible. So that was memed. And they tried to make it look real, and they didn't have the technology. So that immediately turned me off because I don't like developers trying to do things that they can't do yet. I'd rather they do something simple and focus on doing something good. Next, and this is the bit that really gets me now, anyone that plays RPGs, especially JRPGs, knows that part of the love of JRPGs is grinding. In other words, going out and fighting the same battle over and over and over again to boost your stats so you can just breeze through the next boss. If, of course, you're struggling with said boss. Sometimes you don't. You can progress normally, but you can grind. You can grind away and level up just by kind of like I suppose, Skyrim, where if you want to be a good lockpick guy, you just do lots of lockpicking. But yeah, you grind.
Mhm.
And that's pretty much every JRPG you can grind. They decided to take that away from Final Fantasy VIII, and what they'd done instead was every level you managed to grind, whatever enemy you face next would increase by that level as well. You could never level up over an enemy.
What?
Yeah,
So
they took it.
I don't understand that. That's
Well,
weird.
what they did do was you could draw magic. You could magic in Final Fantasy VII was materia. It was orbs of magical power like fire and water and whatever, and you could use that to throw fireballs and whatever. In Final Fantasy VIII, you could draw magic out of your opponent or out of the ground if you found a magical well, I suppose it was. And what you could do, rather than spending those magic points on just casting that magic, like cast heal or cast fireball, you could put that magic into your gear to make you stronger.
Right.
So you could level up as long as you used all your magic to level up your gear, but not use any magic in a Final Fantasy game. Another thing that annoyed me. But yeah, it was the whole level grind, taking that away. That was the end for me. Despite it not looking great, being over. The story as well. The main group of protagonists are a group of orphans that grew up together as children but don't remember each other as adults, despite the fact that all went to the same academy after they left the orphanage. So I don't know whether there was maybe some translation errors between the Japanese version of the game and then the Western version of the game, but I just find the game to be an absolute mess, and people are going to hate me for that, because for everybody who loves Final Fantasy VII, there's somebody who loves Final Fantasy VIII.
Just sounds really confusing.
It was just too much change and too soon after Final Fantasy VII, because they'd made a hit game. That was probably the first time that a JRPG could have done like a proper sequel. They could have used the same characters and everything. It was so loved, but they changed so many of the mechanics of what we're used to in JRPGs, and the story was awful, and the characters looked terrible,
horrendous.
It could make me cry, but make it cutesy. That's fine. I mean, I'm sure you know Cloud Strife from Final Fantasy VII.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's a polygonal, jaggy little thing. But you recognise him because he's not meant to look human in that. It's just a representation. They tried to make Squall look human, and it was horrible. It was horrible.
I can see her shuddering here as you're talking there. It's like, it's terrible.
They just got it all wrong. They got the story, the look, and the gameplay. And it drives me mad that there's one Final Fantasy game that I will never play to completion. Never, ever. But you're making me take it to the island.
Well, I've got to, I'm afraid. I can see the pain on your face there. And,
I chose this. I could have chose it. I could have chose a game I liked. I didn't even think about that. And now I'm taking Final Fantasy VIII to this desert island.
No, it's only fair that you take something that at the end of it all, you've put your 30 hours into Final Fantasy 13. You need to do. You've put your time into your sword work in Skyrim, and you've listened to your soundtrack on Mafia 3, and you completed Masters of Champions hundreds of times already. There's no getting around it. You're going to have to play it at some point. I'm sorry.
Oh, but yeah, there you go. That's the game that I absolutely hate from a series I absolutely love. But I think that happens a lot. I think if you've got a series of games that's well loved, there's always going to be one in the mix that really irks.
There's always one. Yeah, there's always one lurking somewhere that you go, do you know what? That wasn't quite as good as that one.
Yeah.
Well, that brings us to the end of this journey, which has been absolutely fascinating. Some games I've never even heard of in that, and I've learned a lot more about ones I didn't know about as well, and various different things. Cracking gaming history as well. Some really excellent stuff from the real start of computing and consoling with the Spectrum and the arcade experience, and that was great. Love the PlayStation commitment as well. That was, your passion again for that comes through. It's just been absolutely brilliant to understand this. I tell you what, I'm still surprised. There's only one Spectrum game in your top 6, which was a little bit of a surprise, that one.
I didn't pick them as a top 6, though. I picked them as games that would entertain me.
Yeah, I've used the word top 6 again. I'm probably not. That's probably the wrong word to use it. It's like 6 games for a desert island as such. But yeah, I don't know. I thought it might be maybe one more in there. But
Well, there was a couple that I wanted to put in. Rebel Star. I don't know if you know Rebel Star.
I don't know that one at all.
Rebel Star. Do you know the XCOM games?
Yes.
Rebel Star's where it started.
Right. Okay.
I mean, why don't you should have a look into that? I think you'd find that fascinating.
I will do.
And Minder, the licensed TV game. I'm sure you remember Minder.
I remember the theme tune very well.
Do you remember the game?
I don't know. I think I've seen videos on it, but I've never seen it.
Yeah, you play as Arthur Daly and you wheel and deal. You go to the Winchester and buy items for as low as you can and try to sell them for as high as you can. You try to stay out of jail.
That's pretty much like every episode of Minder, isn't it?
2 bonus ZX Spectrum games that I thought about taking.
No,
Rebel Star's fantastic.
I will have a look.
Turn-based strategy game. Probably one of the very first ones.
I'll have a look at that one. But yeah, Minder I am aware of. But
well, yeah. I watched the TV show back in the 80s, so.
Oh, right. That was going back years, wasn't it, when that was on? It was always a big television programme, wasn't it, for those people who don't know.
Yeah, it was, yeah. Dennis Waterman and George Cole.
Yeah, and then Dennis Waterman left, didn't he? And Gary, somebody when they took over.
Oh, I didn't watch it after that. I don't watch newfangled programmes, when they change things.
Well, the main characters changed, that was it, wasn't it? Dennis Waterman went off to make a comedy for BBC One, I think. That's what he left Minder.
Yeah.
And that was terrible. Anyway, enough about him and more about this. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on, Stuart. I've really enjoyed this. As I always say to everybody, I really enjoyed it, and I have really enjoyed it. Your passion comes through. Really, really funny moments as well, and it's nice to reminisce and have a few tangents about things that we're very familiar with. Being of around the same age, there's a lot of familiarity going on. A
similar journey through gaming life.
Yeah. Mine's probably, I don't know. Would it be too dissimilar? Probably be a bit different to your list as such. But again, just because we're going in different directions. But the influence is certainly in the early days, the arcades and Space Invaders, and we talk chip shops.
Micros.
Yeah. Chip shops have been very influential on me, as you can tell by the size that I am. They've always been very, very important. But
this is Scotland. We deep fry everything.
I was going to say, well, yes, you do. Well, that's what I understand anyway. If I'm led to believe what it is, but
no, it's true. We'll deep fry anything.
Anything that moves, or not, or not possibly. Yeah. But no, I've seriously enjoyed doing this. It's been fantastic to have you on, and I hope you've really enjoyed it.
It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been so nice to talk to someone about a subject that I'm passionate about, that you're passionate about, and other passionate people are going to get to watch this or listen at least to this. So.
Yeah, and the great thing about it is having spoken to people today about this in person, the way they listen to it, they don't listen to it all in one go. I mean, that's an awful lot of things for people to expect them to do, but they listen to it in hour chunks or 45-minute chunks, and that's how it should be consumed perfectly. And I think it's a great way to do it, and it's great to get people on like yourself talking about the history. It's great for me because I see, like everybody else, the YouTube side of you. So for me, I get to learn more about you as a gamer, and as everybody else who's listening get to learn exactly the same as well. So I think it's a win-win situation for everybody. And of course, you get to talk about your passion and your hobby in great depth, other than just doing your usual channel. So
I mean, the channel's fine, but chats like this are way much more fulfilling.
Yeah.
It's nice to be able to bounce your ideas and thoughts off at another person, whereas the camera, it's you talking to yourself.
That's it. Sometimes it's a strange experience, so it is nice to have that personal contact with somebody else at the end asking the questions, or if you mention the point, trying to elaborate on that, and it's something else. Like I said right at the very start of this, if you are have listened to our chat and want to go and see what Stuart's channel is all about, it's called Generation Pixel, and there will be a link in the description below. If you haven't listened to any of these previous episodes, well, go back, and there's about 10 episodes in the archives now. I can't remember, I lost count where we are. Plenty more of these to come as well. Trying to get one of these uploaded every Saturday morning for people to listen to however they wish to, whatever they are doing. But that's it for this round of Desert Island Games. Once again, my heartfelt thanks to Stuart, Generation Pixel, for giving up his time to do this. Much appreciated, my friend. Thank you very much indeed once more.
Thank you as well, because it's been an absolute pleasure.
Well, thank you. I do appreciate that. And we will speak to you again very, very soon. If you have enjoyed this, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and tick that bell for more notifications when videos get uploaded. But from the confines of the Rescue Centre, this is the Retro Bear saying thank you very much indeed for listening. Do take care, and we'll see you again very soon. Bye for now.